Meeting of the State Board of Education. We will start our meeting with our normal procedure of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming this morning. We have a fairly full agenda. I would remind folks in the audience, if you haven't signed in yet, please sign in. There's a sign-in sheet down at the back table. And I think Rebecca has an introduction that she would like to make.
Yes. Wanted to introduce Amy Fowler, who's just joined the agency as the Principal Assistant to the Secretary for Education Quality. And I will let Amy explain some of her background and also some of the work that she hopes to accomplish at the agency.
Good morning. This is on, I believe. It's nice to meet everyone. My name is Amy Fowler. I come to Vermont from Oakland, California, where I was working for the last 3 years. I'm joining the agency, as Rebecca said, as the Principal Assistant to the Secretary of Education for Education Quality. This is a new position at the agency, and what we're looking to do is combine efforts underneath the education quality standards related to teacher and principal licensure, teacher and principal evaluation, and of course their preparation and professional development throughout their careers. And then I'll also have the privilege of working with Deputy John Fisher on the school quality reviews that are part of EQS as well. So that's the work that we're going to be doing. It's new to the agency. I've now been in Vermont for 3 weeks, so I'm learning a lot. And please, when we meet again, remind me of your name and don't assume that I know it, because I forget easily. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and welcome to the state of Vermont. Welcome to the agency. We look forward to working with you.
I as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. The next item on the agenda is a proposed executive session. Krista.
I make a motion for executive session to deal with confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body pursuant to BSA 313.
Is there a second to the motion? Mark seconds. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and we are now in executive session. Agenda item C. Are there members of the public that wish to be heard this morning? Not seeing any, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Now, I think there was...
I would like to pull the Sunrise, the opportunities, green sheet to vote on separately so I can vote on the rest of the packet. It is a conflict, as in I do work for this program. I work in the agency that has this program.
Which one was it again?
It's the opportunities, D.
Number C?
C, 2C.
Sunrise Family Resource Center?
Yep.
Okay.
We want to pull that one.
In the discretion of the chair, item C has been pulled off the consent agenda. Is there a motion on the remaining? Jean Marie's moved approval of the items on the consent agenda with the exception of 2C. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Chris has seconded. Any discussion? Discussion on the consent agenda motion? Or
No, on the consent agenda. I have a discussion, just a general, just
okay.
comments. So instead of going through my individual questions on the green sheets of those enclosed, I just would like to say that I would, I think the board, at least myself, I can speak for myself, would like to better understand the formatting of the green sheet in terms of the differentiation between why some would be 22 months, why some would be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, why some would have in the approval process the number of students, while some would talk about a report. I just would like to see for my own sake, sort of a more general format to also maybe explain what well-qualified means. I know that in public schools, certain teachers need to be actually have licenses in certain areas.
If I can interrupt for a second, in the chair's conversation with the secretary, we've agreed on the on September agenda. The board will get a full explanation from the agency on this whole process of certifying independent schools.
Okay.
So, and I think a lot of us have questions on the process, and that will be an opportunity for us to learn more about the process, and equally as important to ask any questions that we might have on it. So, save your notes for the next meeting. The motion before us is approval of the consent agenda. Is there any other comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda, with the exception of item C, has been approved.
Do you want a motion on C?
Yes.
So moved.
Bill has moved approval of Sunrise Family Resource Center. I believe it's a renewal. Is there a second to that motion? Bonnie has seconded, and I'll call on John Marie.
I actually would just like to clarify one thing in this green sheet. It talks about how the participants or the students have free childcare, and I thought it might come to somebody's attention how this agency opportunities manages to do that. And what I'd like to just clarify is that the teens' children can go free of charge to them if they qualify for a subsidy and eligibility. If I was reading this, I would wonder how that magic free word came about. So I just wanted to clarify that it's free to the students if they qualify for subsidy that they're eligible for. And it's a fabulous program. And I will be recusing myself from voting.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, the motion is to approve from the consent agenda, item 2C, Sunrise Family Resource Center in Bennington. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that is...
One abstention.
And one abstention for the record. You got that, Perry?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Moving on to board announcements. Are there any members of the board that wish to make announcements? Bill?
Three quick things. Did participate in the NASB Governmental Affairs Committee conference meeting. Waivers is the big question there, but it isn't an issue for us, as we didn't go for a waiver, and we understand other states are seeing things similar to the way we are. Sean Marie and I attended the principals meeting and heard Andy Hargraves, and Sean Marie may want to say more about that. And Mark and I attended the finance session in Burlington, and of course that will get increasing interest as the year goes on.
Krista?
So Sean Marie was unable to make it to the standards board meeting, so I filled in for her last Thursday. And at the meeting, they were also working on their strategic plan. So it was 2 meetings on strategic plans, so back to back. They also had a revote of their leadership. Everybody's still the same. Still Steve and John. Nobody changed. I gave them just a rundown of what we were doing and talking about our goals. And the idea, and I just told them that our goals of sustainability and stability for public education, and then also equity and opportunity for all. And they just brought up a little bit of a conflict between stability and sustainability, and so that might be something that we want to address later. Mostly at this meeting, there was a lot of work talking about licensure and some of the issues that were going on currently, and that they had pushed through most of all of the licensure processes for teachers for the upcoming year. So they worked on that. And there was also some commonalities in things that I was noticing at our board meeting and their board meeting. The idea of a question of the AOE staff and do they have enough resources? and just questioning that maybe they would like to work with us to advocate at the state level for putting more funding back into the agency. So that was something that they were worried about, making sure that the agency has the resources it needs, and making sure that there could be an opportunity for the two boards to work on that when it comes to January. And other than that, they, again, are just working on their mission and vision and just reshuffling for the school year.
Other board members, Sean Marie?
So thank you, Krista. Bill and I were at the Vermont Principals Association. The main speaker was really quite fabulous. Rebecca did an awesome job talking about the letter and going out to parents, and that I'm assuming you might comment on under your report today. And everybody was very pleased to hear Rebecca's, all the principals that I was sitting around were very pleased to hear the sort of tone down on the failing schools end of things. I was also contacted by the Vermont Arts Council to attend this information meeting, and they're trying to bring people together around the arts. I volunteered Krista to go. I thought maybe I will forward the email. It is on September 11th from 10 to 3 at the Vermont College of Fine Arts. I mentioned that Stacy might be interested in Mark because they're all sort of in somewhat proximity to there. NASB also reached out to me. They have a committee of board members, NASB board members from around the state, visiting 2 schools in New England that are associated with, they feel that they're been very efficient and supportive in associating with college and career readiness and civic success. I don't know the name of the schools, but one's in Boston and one's in Rhode Island, and I suggested that since I'm halfway through my term, that perhaps Krista, who's also a teacher, might be able to.
She does have to work.
Well, she cleared it with my principal already.
The principal happened to be at the Principals Association conference, and I mentioned it to him, and I said I wasn't certainly asking for the approval, but that she may be asking. So that one is a high school and one is a K-12. So those are my reports for the last 2 months, and I won't elaborate on the Andy, what's his last name?
Hargraves.
And I will say that it is no wonder he's a friend of Bill's. They are very like-minded, so it was excellent report. All right, Stephen, I'm done.
Any other announcements from board members? All right, we'll move on to the chair's report, which will be very quick. The main part of my report was shared this morning at the Strategic Planning Committee. Was a school in Maine. I wanted you to know that I visited. But more importantly, if anyone in the audience is curious what I'm talking about, I'd be glad to share it with you over lunch. The main point I want to make here, it occurs to me as we're beginning to talk about what might be coming before the legislature this winter. I realize it's only August, but it's probably timely to start thinking about reforming a legislative committee to work through our priorities that can be brought back to the board. So I would ask any of you who have any desire to serve on the legislative committee, please let me know, and in September we'll go through the formality of appointing the committee. So Perry, remind me of that, please. Bonnie, item G, the strategic planning update.
Oh, okay. So we had a work session prior to this meeting, and our 2 goals, as Krista indicated, are stability and sustainability for public education, and our second goal is equity and opportunity for all. So at this point, we're in the process of developing strategies in order to realize this goal, and we'll be working on that over the next couple months. In September, we'll hopefully have a draft that we will then put out to the public and start receiving public comment in hopes of having a strategic plan ready for December or January. December, I guess. So that's it.
And we really encourage those of you in the audience and beyond who have any thoughts on this proposal as we're developing it, please do not hesitate to contact the, don't contact me, contact the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. Any other,
All comments are welcome.
any other thing on the item G? If not, we'll move on to item H. And Jill, I hope you noticed that I not only got us back on schedule, but I got us ahead of schedule.
Very impressive.
Good morning, my name is Jill Rennick. I'm the Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs at the Agency of Education. And it is also my distinct privilege to bring forth to you folks some of the most outstanding teachers in the state today. So get ready for what I know will be the highlight of my week, my month. I know it will be the same for you. Basically, this is one of the many steps in the process of the 2005 Vermont Teacher of the Year selection. And we also are being joined not only by the finalists, but also by some of the folks who have been a part of the committee all along. So if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, if you're on the Teacher of the Year selection committee, would you mind standing up and introducing yourselves?
I'm Karen Heath, and I was Teacher of the Year in 2005, and I'm now the Literacy Coordinator for Berry Supervisory Union.
Judy Allard, I was Teacher of the Year in 1998, and I'm retired.
Julie Longchamp, I'm with Vermont NEA and was a teacher and a retired teacher from Chittenden South.
Carol Smith, I was the Teacher of the Year in 1995, and I am also retired.
I didn't want to stand up and block your view of them. I'm Luke Foley. I'm the 2014 Vermont Teacher of the Year, and I teach at Northfield High School.
Thank you. So these folks have been not only helping design the process, but have also been participating in reviewing applications. We hosted interviews with the candidates that you're about to meet, and we'll be continuing to usher them through this process. So like I said, there are actually 5 stages of selecting the Vermont Teacher of the Year for 2015. The teachers are nominated by, usually by their principal or a colleague. They have to complete a pretty extensive application, write essays. There's a lot of hoops to jump through just to even submit the application, which we very much appreciate. Then the group that you've met and others in that same capacity, past Teachers of the Year, review the applications and score the applications, and we have now selected 5 finalists who you'll be hearing from today. Those folks were interviewed at the beginning of August by the panel, including Teachers of the Year, Principal of the Year, by Julie and others. And then they are here today to give you what we referred to as an elevator speech. I think we should hear from all of them all day long, but in the interest of time and the fact that we've also asked them to stay for lunch, they will be doing a 3 to 5 minute, just brief speech so you folks can really get to know who they are. I'm hoping that you have the score sheets that were sent out. If you don't, Perry has copies of that. So we're actually putting you folks to work as a part of the process. So after each of the candidates has done their speech, you can jot your notes down, and then Perry and I can collect those from you later today.
You know, it might be helpful, excuse the interruption, so we can write the names on the sheets now. Do you have the order that they're presenting?
Sure. Yep. Yep, so we have Alan Crowley, Christina Norland, Mark Chabot, what's it?
Wait a minute.
C-H-A-B-O-T.
Christina Nolan?
Norland, N-O-R-L-A-N-D. And I'll, of course, be sure to introduce these folks as well. Mark Chabot, C-H-A-B-O-T. Rebecca Haslam, H-A-S-L-A-M. Not to be confused with the other Rebecca H. in the room, I just realized. And Stephanie DeCaro.
Thank you.
Sure. So we'll be hearing from these folks today, and like I said, we've invited them to stay for lunch, which I also think would be a great experience for all of us to participate in. And then so we'll be collecting those. We also have scoring from the interviews, from the application review. We will also be doing classroom visits in September and October, which are really, so we put them through all these pretty significant paces to really get a sense of the entire the entire person. And we know, and I'm sure Luke could speak to this, what's asked of the Vermont Teacher of the Year is a lot. It's a public face to all Vermont teachers and Vermont education. We at the agency certainly call on these folks to help us out throughout the years. And they also are recognized on the national level. And at least they used to get to meet the president. Have you gotten to meet the president?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty great. And also, of course, be considered for the National Teacher of the Year. So I think that's the rundown of the pretty significant work that we have for these folks. And without further ado, I guess I would like to ask if Alan could come up. And I guess I would just ask if you folks could introduce yourselves and where you're from, and then hear from you. Thank you.
Please sit in that same seat. Good morning. Thanks for having us here today. My name is Alan Crowley. I'm an English teacher at Missisquoi Valley Union High School in Swanton, Vermont. Like everyone else here, I was saddened and reflective upon the passing of the great actor and comedian Robin Williams last week. What was particularly impactful to me was that his role as Mr. Keating in the film Dead Poets Society was a powerful image of what it meant to me to be a teacher when I was first starting my career in the 1980s. I still love the movie and admire the character, just as I still like to tell stories, crack jokes, and make impassioned speech addresses to my students. But to be honest with you, Mr. Keating's heroic stand-up routine is not how I aspire to be a teacher anymore. It may surprise you to hear that the most important thing I have learned about being a great teacher over my career is to figure out how to more effectively sit down, to more intentionally sit beside my students, as well as with my colleagues, in a process of trying to learn together. In fact, did you know that the word assessment, that all-encompassing power concept in our profession today, comes from the Latin verb assidere, which means to sit beside? One of the great gifts of riding the successive waves of student-centered, learner-centered school improvement over the decades of my career is that I've learned that teaching is most decidedly not about the talking, but really about the listening. This learning has been most powerfully reinforced by my study of neuroscientists and their growing consensus of how the brain works as people really learn. I've discovered that the teacher's primary work is not performing, explaining, and demonstrating. These things are still very important, they still matter, but that the teacher's primary job is to be a learner. Now, not so much in an ongoing way about his or her academic discipline, though that too is important, but to be a learner about the minds of each and every one of his or her students. A successful teacher must learn how to look at what might be inside those magnificently designed brains. What prior knowledge, what misconceptions, what fears, what deep motivations. In my early years, every new concept I learned felt at first like an interruption to my old school, new school image of Mr. Keatingness. The idea of the teacher as superhero inspiring kids while subversively rocking the system. But as I learned more deeply about special education, differentiated instruction, multiple intelligences, performance-based assessment, and so many more of the giant ideas and best practices that are forming our increasingly coherent consensus of what it means to be a true educator, I found myself internalizing them in ways that filled me with new excitement, new direction, and new effectiveness. It was about 10 years into my career when in Woodstock, Vermont, I took my first position as a teacher leader in a public school. That something really big broke for me in terms of what really works in the classroom. I began to realize that the energetic, exhorting, explaining style that I had prided myself on, where I was effectively the center of all the action in the classroom, seemed to reach only a select few students in any class. Either the kids who seemed to be already wired in just the same way I was, in terms of loving language and ideas, or kids who had already mastered so much of the game of traditional school. But the great aha moments, the great pleasures, and longest lasting accomplishments in the classroom came from the one-on-one connections. an impromptu conference, a look over a student's shoulder, a literal sitting beside a student to share the story of what I was seeing as we looked at their work together. Wow, I love how you did that. That's so interesting. I can see what you're trying to do there. What if you tried this? Is that the direction you were driving? My Mr. Keatingness had been working out okay, but not as well as I thought. When I was teaching in a private school or a college setting with self-motivated or very competitive students, but in our changing society and with the diverse reach of our public schools, realizing that so many students needed so much to find an experience of safety, success, and confidence to open up to new learning, the whole manage the group thing, I'll say jump and you say how high, just didn't seem very useful anymore. So the setup of my classroom had to change. My relationship style had to change. My instructional focus had to change. And suddenly all these add-ons of educational reform revealed themselves to me even more clearly as the power tools of an expansive, collaborative tool shed that made teaching more fun, more focused, and more effective than I had ever dreamed it could be. And what has developed most powerfully in my past decade at Missisquoi Valley High School is that I have learned how to sit down in another way, to sit beside my colleagues in a new kind of collaboration based on shared curriculum, shared data, and new protocols that help empower risk, trust, and growth. One of the shadow sides of the popular image of the rogue teacher hero is the isolation that can happen to all teachers. Disappearing, though perhaps not fast enough, is the idea of this lone Superman teacher, entitled to shut his or her door, cover his or her window, and do things his or her way. No matter how talented, how inspired, or inspiring the teacher is, many pathways to growth are shut down, especially challenges to his thinking and exposure of the ideas of others. As importantly, teachers who may be new or struggling can be shut out of an opportunity to learn and reflect from a highly effective colleague. Perhaps worst of all, the students in the broader school community can suffer when instead of the guaranteed curriculum and best practice instruction they all need and deserve, their hope must rest in the lottery of the course scheduling system. Oh, lucky you, you got the good teacher. My most important message to you today, the leaders in our state that are the stewards and partners in this shared journey of school improvement, is I want to tell you, actually shout out from the rooftops, that it is working. No matter the inevitable political complications, the faltering attempts, the too eager extremes, the broader idea of accountability, of equity, of opportunity, of standards-based feedback that can help schools come together and grow is working. My school is a powerful example of Vermont's balance of accountability, flexibility, and support that has moved us forward in astonishingly effective ways. 7 years ago, as one of the schools first identified as in need of improvement through the NECAP testing, we endured some real consequences in terms of administrative change. MVU has long been a place with highly motivated and diversely talented professionals, but we were more than a little bit lost of what direction to move in. With the accountability of concrete standards and the kind of testing data that challenged us to rethink together everything we did concerning assessment, curriculum, and instruction, we have made what I think are exhilarating breakthroughs. Our dialogue with the Agency of Education and highly effective consultants like the Vermont Higher Ed Collaborative has recreated us as a community of shared leadership that truly sits beside each other in an authentic assessment of our goals and programming. I am so proud to be a Vermonter, and especially a Vermont educator, working in a balanced partnership with our government, local board, union association, and many, many colleagues with their boots on the ground to truly put our students first. My last word to you today is it's true. It's really true. all students can learn, and all students need to learn. This insight is so much more than a platitude, so much more than a hopeful ideal. It is an organizing, research-based principle built on the bedrock of biological neuroscience and carefully researched cognitive psychology, verified by lived experience. We must and can continue to learn, to teach by sitting beside our students, because we now know better than ever that in the most important sense, intelligence is malleable. The brain on learning has a plasticity which, through risk, effort, failure, feedback, and guided revision, transforms learners from novices to experts, students and teachers alike. Though I've left my Mr. Keating days far behind, I am the happiest and most effective teacher I have ever been, because I've learned that my own personal journey is to grow always as this kind of learner. I ask you to recommit to this powerful growth mindset in the invitation our late poet laureate Robert Frost gave to all of us in his poem, The Pasture. You come too. Thank you.
Dead Poet Society was my inspiration. Good morning. I'm Christina Norland from Edmonds Elementary School in Burlington, and I'm happy to be here to talk about what I do and what I love. I love teaching children, and I love teaching children music. A quote of Maya Angelou speaks to why I do what I do. At the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They'll remember how you made them feel. It's my joy every day to teach the beautiful and diverse children of Burlington. And what I want to believe at the end of every day is that the hundreds of children that I touch are growing into better people, better students, better musicians, and better citizens ultimately because of my part in their lives. There are several things that I'm all about as a teacher. Transforming the way that I speak to kids in order to get a positive behavior result is right at the top. My passion for quality education in the arts is why I'm a music teacher. My drive for efficiency and fun in the classroom determines the way that I run things. And my core belief that holding the standards high for kids in a supportive environment will cause them to really rise up and achieve excellence has always been a part of me. Kids can and will do amazing things when we set them up for it. But I'll focus on the first two today. You probably know, I'm sure you know, that Vermont is recognized as a leader in math and language arts achievement. But the gap between lower and higher income students is just as much a problem here as in the rest of the country and the rest of the world. So how can we begin to close the achievement gap between different socioeconomic groups and provide an equitable education for all of Vermont students? At the most basic level, we need to provide kids with a positive school community, a place where they feel safe and welcome to be themselves so that they can be ready to learn. School climate impacts our low socioeconomic students more than any other group. So what should we do? It starts in the classroom by really teaching behavior expectations, using positive language with kids, and praising them specifically when we catch them doing the right thing. When teachers actively work to transform the way that they talk to kids and to transform student behaviors across the school, the results are clear, and student success rates go up. It's evident in studies, and it's evident for any teacher who's actually really tried to do this. What else works to help bridge the achievement gap? Arts education works. Obviously, this is a time when we need to be creative and think outside of the box. Our nation has suffered, I feel, from a hyper-focus on test scores to measure outcomes, but the NECAP test cannot possibly give us a full sense of a child's growth or a child's worth. Today, STEM schools, which focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, are all the rage, but I think of a society that
was only about those 4 things. Where's the beauty? We need to add the A in for the arts to make it STEAM instead of STEM, and that will transform a child's life and a school, a community, and ultimately a society. So I'm really glad that some forward-thinking people in Vermont, including Secretary Holcomb, is aware of this kind of thing and promotes Einstein's idea that not all that we measure matters, and not all that we measure matters, and not all that matters can be measured. And that the arts deserve a real place in our schools. Do you know, in my music classroom, I do not see that disparity between the different socioeconomic classes. A few years ago, I taught a kid who was bright, but he didn't have the spark for learning until he discovered music. This 11-year-old took up the saxophone, and he was magically engaged. His grandmother wrote me a letter saying that nothing had interested him in school until he discovered music, and that changed everything for him. And this child, I feel, represents all the low-income students in Vermont who deserve to be engaged but are missing that spark. And his story shows that there's hope in the arts for engaging and igniting that spark. So I think we should combine the power of the positive school community and the power of arts education to reach all of our students and watch what happens. Maya Angelou was right. At the end of the day, people will remember how we made them feel. So let's make sure our students feel safe and respected. And let's make sure they know their creative ideas are worth expressing in our schools and in our society. I'm humbled by the nomination for Vermont Teacher of the Year, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with you what I do and what I love. It's an honor and a privilege to teach the children in Vermont and to be in the position to make each child's day and world a better one. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Haslam, and I live and work and teach and raise my children in Burlington. Over the past decade, I've taught in 4 of our 6 elementary schools in the city. I've taught 5th grade, 4th, 3rd, and now 1st. This will be my 5th year in a job share situation. So I've had the gift of many talented partners. My first 3 years in a job share, I had Jane Miller as a partner, and most of you probably are familiar with her through her work with the Vermont Writing Collaborative, and she was also Vermont State Teacher of the Year in 1992. Last year, my partner teacher was a first-year teacher, so I had the opportunity to be her mentor and kind of lead our curriculum. And then this year, my job share partner is the district math coach. So I'm able to benefit from the expertise of all these different people that I'm working with in my first grade teaching role. The other half of my job is as social studies coach for the district K-5. This is a position that I actually created in order to continue to be able to develop social justice-based curriculum, pilot those units with teams of teachers across the district, and then share them widely. Despite our rigorous state standards in Vermont history, or in history and social studies in Vermont, we were actually lacking curriculum. So this past year, I worked with teams of teachers and a local historian to finalize units for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and we'll be presenting these to teachers at each school during in-service next week. This year, my task will be to complete that vertical map for social studies curriculum by doing the K through 2. A new component of my social studies coaching position is now equity curriculum coach. The units I've developed explicitly address the topics of race and equity and integrate culturally responsive pedagogy into all areas of curriculum across disciplines. Transforming the way we teach children, developing the curricular resources we need, and providing the professional development opportunities necessary to change our existing paradigms are all essential components of what I do as an equity curriculum coach. I'm also a member of the district's Equity Council. We have representatives from each school who meet monthly to discuss diversity and equity issues in our district, as well as to work collaboratively to bring those equity professional development opportunities to our schools. I am in my 2nd year of working with a small group over the summer of teachers and administrators to develop equity conversations, which all staff will be using for professional development throughout the year, pre-K to 12. And the goal of this work is to move us along that continuum of cultural competency. We have been tackling topics such as white privilege, examining our own biases, looking at data through an equity lens, and cultural diversity, gender identity, and as you can imagine, these sessions are challenging. They are often met with enthusiasm and caution, engagement and silence, and introspection and denial. It often feels like very, very small steps, but we are starting to walk the equity walk in Burlington, and it's exciting and it's very hard work. I feel personally invested in this process, and I'll continue to be a leader in this work moving forward. In my work this summer leading the district's curriculum committee, I've been reading the work of John Hattie. He's a researcher examining the effect size of the many different factors that go into the education of a child. My big takeaway from his research is that our primary role as teachers is to examine our own effectiveness on learning. Teachers don't often toot our own horns, and if anything, we defer the credit to any success to our students. And of course, our students deserve credit for their successes. But I do believe that wonderful, great, amazing teachers also deserve some credit for those successes. On the other hand, when students don't succeed, teachers are often quick to point the finger to factors outside of our control, such as poverty, emotional distress, family life. But what we're not doing enough of is evaluating our own teaching and our own efficacy. If we look at Hattie's research, we can see that most of what we do as teachers has some kind of positive effect on students. Our challenge is to focus our energy on those factors which have the most significant effects. This requires us to change that mindset. Of course, there are factors over which we have zero control, and these barriers to success too often give teachers a reason to give up, pass the buck, and accept just a little bit of growth in a year as success. John Hattie reminds us that a little bit of growth is not enough, and he even goes as far as to say that doing your best isn't enough. His research shows us that minority students and impoverished students often set very low goals for themselves compared to students from dominant culture, and this is one example of when saying do your best really isn't good enough. Our challenge is to encourage students to exceed their own expectations and do better than their best, and here's where we come in. If we as teachers can shift that mindset and focus on the things we can do, the things over which we do have control, then we can start to own the achievement gap. Through collaboratively examining our own practices, we can start to do what otherwise feels rather impossible. I believe that every child has the right to the best possible public education, every child. And in Burlington, this is a wide spectrum, racially, culturally, linguistically, socio-emotionally, and economically. We are doing the highest stakes work, and I take my jobs very seriously because I'm responsible to the most important people in the world. Their parents entrust them into my care, and this is an honor that I don't take lightly. I wanted to offer something different to students in Burlington than what I had in my own experiences in school. I got very accustomed to being hypervisible, but not often invited to speak. So I started to create tools and resources that I felt were lacking in Burlington. I am a confident speaker and a natural leader, and I was successful in my attempts to convince the school board to create my current position so that I can continue my work with teams of teachers developing units of study that highlight human rights, multiple perspectives, and social justice. This year, I piloted a third grade curriculum at Edmonds Elementary, and as I walked around downtown with a class of third graders and listened to their conversations about the cultural influences of different groups of immigrants still present in Burlington today, I was so excited to see and to hear that each and every one of them were engaged. They were able to see modern immigration in the context of history, and they were able to see that everybody in Burlington has a place here, both in history and currently. In a fifth grade class, I got to witness a group of students using primary documents to explore the arrival of Columbus and his crew from two different perspectives. They acted out, how each group of people felt during this momentous occasion. And I saw students who were highly engaged, passionate in their roles, and bringing history to life with a critical analysis. In my own first grade class, I had students identifying change makers in different genres of literature and in our community. So instead of just teaching about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks in February, I designed a unit on change makers, and I used it to teach my lessons on comprehension strategies, fluency, reading across genres of text, informational text features, research, opinion and argument writing, biographies, autobiographies, poetry, and social action. Children talked about their own parents and the simple ways they make our community a better place. We had one mother come in and talk about her work at the Samaritan House, another come in and talk about her work as a mentor at King Street Center, and a father come in and talk about his work helping to pass the ban on electronic handheld devices in the car. These kinds of family-school partnerships help my students see their role as citizens and help them be empowered to be actively engaged participants in their community. Along with my students, my own 2 children drive my passion for teaching, for early education, and for the need to instill a sense of justice and global citizenship at an early age to prepare them for the world ahead. As they encounter injustices in their interactions and in the greater world, like what's happening right now in Ferguson, children will need to have the tools and understanding to make sense of their world. This is why I believe so deeply in teaching students about their own rights and responsibilities as members of the various communities to which they belong. My first grade students learn that they can be change makers. They know that being kind to a friend, including someone who's left out, treating people fairly, and respecting the many differences and diversity in our community are all ways they can make our community a better place. My first grade students know that their contributions matter. Teachers know that the most effective learning happens when students are able to connect new information to existing schema. That's why it's so important to be knowledgeable of the cultural backgrounds of our students, so we can teach in ways that are culturally relevant to all students. Building that relational trust in my classroom is an important part of my curriculum. I get to know students, their families, what piques their interest, and what nourishes their sense of inquiry. I used to tell my son, "You're the most important person in the world," because as a new mom, that's exactly how I felt every time I looked into his eyes. But I learned to change my script because I don't want my son growing up with that message in his head. I want him to know that yes, he is important, valuable, capable, worthy, and human, just like every other individual he will encounter in his life. I need him to know that each person he meets deserves to be treated with respect, and this starts at such an early age. I love teaching first grade. I get to teach children to read and write and see themselves as capable readers and writers. I can, and I do, teach every one of them to be a reader. I love first grade because my students are still so young. They love coming to school, and they're so eager to learn everything they can. And they're also eager to make sense of their world. And I mostly love it because I know I can have a great impact on their early development as socially conscious beings. I feel happy and fulfilled in my career. I see it as my life's work. And I turn my beliefs into practice through my own teaching and through my work developing and sharing curricula with colleagues. In my coaching role, I can support the implementation of units of study and help teachers develop the skills necessary to be culturally responsive educators. And in my work writing professional development around equity and diversity, I'm able to help shift the mindset of teachers in Burlington necessary to keep us moving along that continuum of cultural competency. These 3 roles keep me very busy. I enjoy the pace and the rigor of my many roles and balance them with the joys of parenting and the rare moments to myself where I can go for a run and clear my head. If I were to be selected as Teacher of the Year, my message would be that public education is the foundation of democracy and that it is our moral imperative to make it available to every child. Especially in an age of vast inequity, we need to prepare our young people to be able to participate in a democratic society and meet the future challenges that await them with strength of character, confidence, and a sense of justice. In order to stop the perpetuation of underachievement in students of color, we need to start owning the gap. It's a huge challenge, but I've bared witness to 10 years of progress already in Burlington, and I look forward to continuing to help us move into the future. Thanks.
Good morning. Good afternoon. No, it's still technically morning. So my name is Stephanie DeCaro, and I teach 2nd grade at the Integrated Arts Academy, formerly H.O. Wheeler School in the Old North End of Burlington. First, I want to say that it is humbling to be sitting here with you, with my colleagues who are clearly amazing. So thank you. And also, I do want to take this moment to thank you for your work. A few years ago, I was able to sit in on education committee meetings at the State House, which was a very interesting experience for me. And one of the things that I saw the concern, and I saw the earnest desire to do the right things. And as a teacher, that's what I look for. So thank you. A little bit about myself. Excuse me. I'm used to a smaller audience. So I am grateful as a teacher. I left a career in fundraising to become a teacher, and I have never looked back. And I've been able to teach in both private and public school settings here in Vermont. Now I teach in the most diverse school in Vermont. As well, another gift of my career is I was able to complete a master's degree with the focus being on the culture of poverty, home culture, cultural backgrounds, and how that impacts a child's learning process. As well, another gift, I've been able to teach abroad in South America and Europe. And all of these experiences have really made me the teacher I am today. And what those experiences have given me is a global view of education, cultural competency, and the ability to meet the needs of every single one of my students in the classroom and eliminate the achievement gap in my classroom. In my classroom, no student is left behind. This year I had students from Somalia, Korea, Japan, China, Ivory Coast, and every single student met or exceeded the goals. When I was in fundraising, I had a business card, and the business card told people that I was a development officer. And a few years ago, a friend of mine suggested that I get a business card, and I actually laughed because what would it say? And as I was writing this, I was thinking, achievement gap eliminator, CEO of second grade. Or as my students last year liked to call me, which I did not mind, queen of second grade. And what it made me think about is, what is my business? What business am I in? And I am in the business of being of service. That is my job. That is our job. My job is to be of service to the students and their families who come across my path in my school. And so I decided that my business card, if I had one, could just say teacher, and that was simply all that it needed. With that, our business, the business of public education, deals with shaping, and from my experience, every day, saving the lives of children. And I tell my students that a teacher's heart is bigger than most because we love every one of our students. And with that, last week I had a power coffee with one of my clients. And she's going into third grade this year, and we met at Starbucks for coffee and cocoa. And she gave me this card, and it says, "You make me feel so many feelings." And I just want to read what she wrote. "You make me feel happy, you make me feel safe, but most of all, you make me feel so many great feelings, and it's all coming from you." And as I was writing this, I realized these are my business cards these days, and these are fabulous. And so with that, this business of public education is about love. And teachers can only make real change in the lives of their students. I don't care where the student is from. I don't care what background the student has when the child comes to me. Because as a teacher, it is my call to love each and every student and bring them exactly where they need to be. And that is the only way that a teacher can make real change, is through love. When we make decisions about the hearts and minds and lives of children, we must look through the lens of love to make the best decisions possible. And it is through this lens that I find my own message to bring to you today. It is through this lens that I find how I can be an effective advocate for the children and families I serve. I know that raising the achievement gap means educating school boards, principals, and teachers about the culture of poverty, the culture of power, home culture, and English language learners. Children need us to have this knowledge. I know that in order to raise the achievement gap, we need longer school days, and we need extended school years, because children need this time. I know that schools are teaching different curricula, and that having a balanced state and local assessment system would ensure equality for all students. Children need equal opportunity. And lastly, and perhaps the most controversial, I don't know, but children need the money. And so I think it's worth continuing to look at redistricting. By redistricting, maybe we won't have to cut early intervention programs that directly improve the achievement of these marginalized populations. Maybe we won't need to cut the kindergarten assistance. The money can go to the children. And Vermont is small enough that we understand the importance of creating financial sustainability to deliver an equitable education. We have this responsibility because the business of education cannot afford any debits. We are unique in our business. We don't have debits. We only have assets. And if we are going to write off the debit side of a ledger, then what that means is we're writing off the future and the life of our children. So thank you. Thank you for being in this business and for leading all of us.
And our last presentation, Mark.
Sorry to have my back to all of you. I'll be speaking to you even if I have my back. My name is Mark Chabot, and I'm a Vermont teacher. I'm also a Vermont immigrant. My mother is an immigrant, too. She came here from Belgium. She met my U.S. GI father in Germany during Reconstruction in 1946. And it is said, anyway, family lore says that the first thing that she did when she arrived in this country was to buy 100 acres of land in Thetford, Vermont for $400. And as time went on, my father grew progressively more ill, and she raised by herself all 6 of her children, me being the last, the youngest, the baby. And she showed grit and determination. She wanted us to value education and music, of course, classical music. And at the same time, she always brought us back to that wild place in Thetford, Vermont. And as a kid growing up in sort of a working class New York suburb, Vermont held me mystified. It gripped my heart. And so when I became of age and went to college, I went to the other side of the river, as we say. I went to Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, and then I taught for 3 years in New Hampshire. And sometime in that 3rd year, I began to have those doubts that young teachers often have. Is this all there is? Is this what I was born to do? Can I be better than this? And the voices got to me, and I decided to go to graduate school. Of course, I got a teaching assistantship, so there was no getting away from teaching. And I got a master's degree in computer science. And then I arrived in Vermont for the last time, staying here. I was a 20-something sort of hotshot programmer, and I was hired to work on artificial intelligence to help in medical decision-making. That was the big research at the time. And the project was great. It was really interesting, and I was alive from here to here. And that was it. And so after about 18 months, I missed teaching. I missed the classroom. I missed the interaction. So I opened the Valley News, and there was a position at Woodstock Union High School for a chemistry teacher. I said, okay, I'm going for that. I got the job, and teaching had changed in those 5 years that I had left. I remembered 94-142, which is the special education law. That was pretty new when I started. It was mature. It was 14 years old when I got to Woodstock. And Woodstock had embraced that, and they had embraced the idea that all students should be included in the regular classroom. Well, I didn't know anything about this, and I felt like a brand new teacher again. And I was sort of overwhelmed. But Woodstock really held me there. And when I think about that experience, I think about the conscience of Vermont, I guess I might call it. And the conscience of Vermont was working on me. And when I think of that, I think of the words of Theodore Parker, who was a 19th century Unitarian minister and abolitionist. And I don't have this memorized, I have to look down. He said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure that it bends towards justice. What was this justice that Parker was talking about in my classroom? In year 2 at Woodstock, it was back to school night, and a parent approached me, and she was angry. It's like, my gifted son is not being challenged in your class, and I am pissed. I was mortified. I don't think I slept more than an hour in each of the next 3 nights thinking about what am I going to do? I'm trying to reach all these students. So I worked on a lot of things, including getting up even earlier in the morning and writing this application, furiously writing this application. And I was delighted to discover a few months later that I was named the 1990 Vermont Christa McAuliffe Fellow. And that the quaint title, I guess, I gave it was Reaching Mainstreamed Students in Chemistry Using Computers. Now, that sounds kind of quaint, almost 25 years later, but it was working. And in fact, soon thereafter, I landed the Vermont Council on Gifted Education's designation of Teacher of the Year. So I had overcome adversity. This parent was no longer my enemy, she was my friend. And for years after that, we continued to be friends. But what were the rewards that it earned me? Let's see. I had more classes, I had more students, I had extra preps. They took my prep time and divided it in 2, so I had 2 22-minute prep periods, all while I was trying to implement a new technology integration program. And I wondered about this justice. Remember this Vermont justice? I'm like, where was the justice for me, and where was the justice for my family? My second son was born during this time. And again, perhaps it was a moment of weakness. A parent came to me and said, I've got this tech firm in Woodstock. There's an opening for a programmer. We'd like to hire you. And I said yes, and I went there. Now, it didn't take long this time. It didn't even take 18 months. I think it took 4 months or 5 to realize that I was not a programmer anymore. I was a good programmer, but this was not where I needed to be. And not too long after that, I ended up working for the late Professor Faith Dunn of Dartmouth, Professor Emeritus. And she's the mother of Matt Dunn, who's Vermont. I think he's in the Senate right now. Not in the Senate anymore? Okay. Anyway, Matt Dunn, he's well known. He's served in a number of places, including AmeriCorps director. Anyway, Faith had this idea that you could develop teacher leaders, that teacher leaders could lead school change if they just had the skills, if they could manage meetings and give feedback. And we had these modules that we worked on. And Faith's work ultimately led to a professional learning community called Critical Friends Groups. I guess you'd say it was PLCs called CFGs, right? Is that the proper terminology? And in that work, later on, I don't have time to tell you about that work, but Faith soon discovered that Dartmouth was not a particularly wonderful place to do education research. It was kind of a hostile place for education research. And so she left, and that left me, well, yet again, without a job. And after some fits and starts, I was approached at Stratford Town Meeting, where I was living, by Martha Jane Rich. And Martha had been the pre-service director of the program that I embarked at Dartmouth to learn how to be a teacher. And we had stayed in touch, and she said, I have an opening at Thetford Academy. Would you like to come back? And I took a deep breath and said, yes. And I haven't looked back since. Now, Martha had created a school that was sort of steeped in the culture of justice, that if the arc of the universe was bending towards justice, it was being bent really hard by Martha at Thetford Academy. But I had come to this little school thinking I was going to bring academic rigor to the rural part of Vermont. And I had spent some time at Dartmouth's Thayer School of Engineering learning how to bring engineering problem solving to the high school classroom. And I was trying to implement that when one day a 17-year-old boy was looking out the window in my advisory group, and he saw 2 students being led across campus, 2 intensive special needs students, one in a wheelchair, really not moving at all, She had cerebral palsy. And the other, an autistic child, sort of jumping along. And he said cynically, "Why are those students even here? Why do we bother? We spend 10 times the money on them than we do on us." He was pretty close. And they can't even learn. What's the point? And I was left feeling cold. Now I gave him the appropriate answer about education for all. But I was left cold by that feeling, and it wasn't a feeling that he wasn't the only one who felt that. I think it was maybe a week later that I woke up with a start and said, wait a minute, what if we could use this engineering problem solving, and I could take my students and meet these two intensive special needs students, and they could design projects, prototypes, that could help them learn and help them how to live better. And so I was a little nervous about this idea. It was kind of a wild idea, and I went to the special educators and I told them about it. And their first question was, when can we start? And from that, we had about 8 years of really amazing projects. And then as the girls began to age out of the system, 23rd birthday and all that, I think it was the 22nd birthday, we began to reach out to the community and reach out to elderly people, disabled people, people who had suffered from strokes, children who had strange diseases where they couldn't go to school. And what happened was that my classroom became less and less relevant, that we needed a bigger space. We needed the whole school to learn. We needed the community to figure out what we were doing. And it put pressure on me, and my colleagues got angry. Why aren't your students in your classroom? Why are they all over these places? And why are they in the shop doing this thing? And they're on these computers. They're not supposed to be there. And I realized that a project can have a life cycle like everything else. It can be born into a beautiful world. It can have a wonderful development. And it can die, just like all of us. And this program, I felt like it needed to be set aside. And at the same time, I was sharing this work. It was published nationally. I speak at Vermont Community Works. But the project needed to go, and I needed something else. And I thought, well, how about robotics? Maybe we could, at least I could put it in my classroom. No one would get in trouble. They wouldn't, be around campus. And about 3 years into this, a student approached me and said, could we start a competitive robotics program? I really like this. This is really cool. And he brought together some more, he was a maven, he brought together some more people. And within 6 months, we were at the World Championship in Florida, that our team had progressed that quickly. We've been to the World Championship every year since then. We've hosted we were the first VEX robotics team in Vermont. We had to travel very far because we also hosted the first tournaments in Vermont. We raised $30,000 in our tiny community for student learning. And in all of this, I guess to try to cut this down, about 2 weeks ago, I received this email from a student. I'll call him John, just so I don't give his name. Hello, Mr. Chabot. I am enrolled in your robotics class. I have difficulty getting around quickly. And Kate, our librarian, suggested that I could get a hold of you and get the code for the Bugs Clock app. This was an app that a student of mine wrote in my mobile apps class to replace the aging bell system we had. I would then try to change the code so it could remind me to leave a few minutes early. If this could be done, it would be greatly appreciated, and if I could also know what platform it was coded on. Secondly, I have cerebral palsy and therefore mild muscle weakness in my right hand and leg. It occurred to me that I could maybe talk to you and create some sort of glove to amplify my movements and increase my hand's dexterity. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, John. And I ask, why would any teacher ever want to retire? So in all this journey, I have learned that Vermont is a crucible for bending the arc of justice, bending the arc of the universe towards justice. It's in our blood, it's in our water. Passed to all Vermont teachers who stay long enough to hear the voice. Vermont teachers reach all kinds of learners, engage our communities, and find challenging, authentic experiences and assessments. We don't pay homage to one-dimensional standardized tests to measure arts teaching and learning. The work and the path that I described represents all Vermont teachers. We take our life experiences and our professional experiences and divine them to a path to student engagement, learning, and ultimately justice. Thank you.
food for thought. I think I speak on behalf of everyone here that we're just so happy to have you all here and honored to hear from you and hear what you have to say and for all the work that you're doing. So thank you for coming on this beautiful day. And we do hope that you'll be able to stay and join us for lunch. So that concludes the Teacher of the Year portion of this item. I do have a second portion. Shall I kick that right now?
You may.
Okay. And before I forget, we will be making the announcement for the 2015 Vermont Teacher of the Year, the alternate and the finalist for our October State Board meeting, October 21st. All right, while we are discussing amazing teachers currently in Vermont schools, we are also really pleased to have with us the 2013 Milken Educator Award recipient. She joins us from Spalding High School, where she teaches language arts. She's a leader in the school, even though she's relatively new in her career. She's a model multi-tiered system of support implementer. She helps develop the curriculum for the district, and we're really thrilled to have her. So we do have a presentation for Katie. Just so you know, with the Milken Educator Award, I know that a lot of you folks were probably at her surprise announcement this past fall. I know some folks in the audience were there as well. Basically, the Milken Family Foundation has this annual award that they give out to teachers across the country to recognize students, teachers who are relatively new in their career but are showing outstanding promise and already having a significant impact on their classroom and community. This is done as a surprise. The individuals are nominated, and the agency, we conduct interviews with references. We talk to folks at the school and colleagues. All of this done without the recipient's knowledge, and then there's a surprise announcement that's usually held in the fall. We're also joined by John Pandolfo, who was a Milken winner, the very first Milken Educator Award winner for Vermont. So thank you for coming. So I hate to put her on the spot. Maybe while I grab something for Katie, would you like to come up? And John, would you like to join her? You guys mind? Did you have anything you'd like to say, John, about the program? Or?
I don't have anything prepared. I guess I would just like to say that the Milken Award for me really gave me an opportunity to grow incredibly as a teacher, and opened up the variety of ways that I could serve students throughout Vermont. And I am, it's a pleasure to wish all that upon Katie, I guess.
Would you like to introduce yourself and say anything?
Sure. I'm Katie Sador Meyer as of a couple of weeks ago, and this has been an incredible journey so far, just getting to meet more excellent teachers and folks like you across the state of Vermont. And I obviously am very passionate about what I do, and I'm excited about the opportunities that this has opened up for me. So thank you.
Well, on behalf of the Milken Family Foundation, the Vermont State Board of Education, previous Milken Educator Award winners, and the agency, I'd like to present you with this award, your Milken Educator Award formally.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Obviously, my favorite part of my job is the teacher recognition, so thank you all very much.
Do you think lunch will be available? We're running ahead. That's usually out in the...
No, it's right here.
Is it ready?
Yeah. No, it's not
like
ready.
at that table.
It's not up. It's in this room. It doesn't look right.
All right, why don't we break for lunch, and we will come back in probably a little less than an hour. So, station back to order. Before we move on to agenda item J, I note that we have a number of new members of the public here, and I would remind you that there's a sign-up sheet back on a table to the left. So if you have not signed up, please sign up. And I will call on the secretary for her monthly report.
All right, thank you. Usually I get to compete with asparagus. Today I get to compete with the sign-up sheet. I know you're not here to see me, so I'll try to be quick. A couple items that I wanted to share with the State Board of Education is, you probably know, the state government has undergone a rescission cut, and we are cutting 4% of expenses across the board. And we'd like to explore having some of that be absorbed by the State Board of Education, with a strong commitment to not interfering and undermining any of your operations. So one of the options that we're looking at is different food vendors, in particular for some of the lunches, to see if there's a way that we can economize. So we may be looking at slightly different lunches. And I promise not to give you peanut butter and jelly and 5-cent milk boxes every day, but you may find it's not always what you become accustomed to. That's one of the options. That would save a lot of money. So the other piece, and we'll be talking with Stephen about that. I know Perry's done some good research, and we'll be presenting some options to the board to review. I also want to talk just about dual enrollment, because some of you have asked me about the effect of dual enrollment and what we're seeing statewide. We haven't got all the data in, but we do have some initial data, and we will be working on a report out. But just off the recent data, what I can tell you is that we're seeing that it's been a very popular program in the state, and there seems to be a strong interest in dual enrollment. In particular, just from fiscal year 13 to fiscal year 14, we have now verified 782 students in fiscal year 13, up to 1,452 in 14, which is almost doubling in 1 year. And that suggests a pretty strong appetite for some of this. And I think that we are now also looking at what courses students are taking, with an eye to seeing which courses are taken by students who then go on to pursue post-secondary opportunities, particularly for students that we don't typically see going on to college. So our eye in analysis is going to be which of these courses seem to be moving the group that didn't historically go into college into those kinds of post-secondary opportunities. And we're really looking forward to doing that analysis. In terms of use, heaviest use has been in Chittenden County. The lightest use is in Essex County. And so what we're mindful is that some areas of the state, whether because of geographic remoteness or distance perhaps from some of the colleges that have been providing access to these courses, they aren't able to take up, or they aren't interested in taking up. So one of our next avenues of work will also be exploring what the cause is of some of those differences in use. So 30% of dual enrollment, so in summer and fall of 2013, for example, was in Chittenden County, and in 2013, summer and fall, there was no dual enrollment in Essex County, just to give you a sense of the breadth. And that's clearly something that we have to be very mindful of, especially given the board's strong commitment to equity, that we need to be identifying where there is an equitable use of this kind of initiative, trying to figure out what are the barriers that might be precluding that. And I just have to call out the Vermont State Colleges. They've been very, very strong and had a strong participation in this program, and we really see that as positive. And they've been open to working with us to try to figure out which courses, again, seem to be the ones that are the ones that are moving students most successfully into post-secondary. And we will more to come. We'll let you know when we have the data and can do a final report. Question? Yeah.
Yes. Do we know how much money it's costing? Where's the money coming from, and what's going to be the impact on taxes now and in the future? Currently, it's coming out of the AOE. And we are looking at pushing off the burden on school districts in the coming year. We're exploring ways to push off. I will be transparent, we're concerned about the budget challenges that many of our districts are facing, and are trying to find ways to mitigate some of the impact of dual enrollment in the coming year. As you know, initially the cost sharing was supposed to start, and we're concerned with the advent of pre-K, which we're also very strongly committed to. We want to make sure that these initiatives and these priorities aren't competing with each other. So we're looking for ways to continue to provide support for dual enrollment until we look for more sustainable solutions. We see these both as incredibly powerful tools for equity, and we want to make sure that they're not in competition with each other, and that we're looking actively for ways to make sure that these opportunities are available to all students. So we can give you actual numbers. I'll put that together for the board at the next meeting. But in terms of moving into the next budgeting cycle, we're looking for ways to try to provide more support out of the agency for something we really see as a critical component or tool in our toolbox for encouraging post-secondary access for all children in Vermont. So.
This may be a little delicate now that the agency works for the administration, but I think some of us are sensitive to the lack of increased funding for the agency over the recent years. Staffing has been a challenge. And one of the things that the legislative committee, once it's formed, might look at, is, would it be appropriate from a policy point of view for the board to encourage some increased funding for the agency? I realize that the timing of this is probably not great, and I don't mean to put the agency in a delicate position now that you don't work for the board anymore, but I think some of us are concerned that for improved educational services in Vermont, that the agency is, pretty much stripped. So,
I like to think we work with the board, and what I can tell you is that we are looking at a new budgeting process that does a better job of helping us align our operations with our purpose. Our purpose is very aligned with the boards. It's also very aligned with the governors, obviously. And, I think we're in an unusual moment in Vermont where there seems to be a fair amount of consensus about what priorities are. And though there is some discussion, disagreement about how to best achieve those, our hope is that by making sure that we're targeting the resources we have at priorities, and we're encouraging us all to be judicious about what we ask. We ask for a lot. Maybe not everything we're asking for is really high value or high leverage. If we can make some judgments about what our most important commitments are, we're hoping to first begin by looking at efficiencies within the agency, and then beyond that, we hope to be in a position where, through this renewed budgeting process, we can really demonstrate need in a more robust way.
and just so I'm clear, I'm not bringing this issue up because you just announced that maybe our budget would be cut and our lunches would be a little minimal.
Are you telling me you don't like peanut butter and jelly,
No.
Stephen? Because I can arrange a hot dog.
No, I love hot dogs.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I'll keep that in mind. But thank you for worrying about us. And I think we're at a period when we can't help but be mindful of the budget pressures people are feeling in the field, and we share a commitment with the board and with the educators and districts and the school boards to make sure that we're targeting the resources that we do have at children where they make the biggest difference. And I think the agency is committed to do its piece in that as well.
Yes, and we understand that.
Okay. And we'll keep you posted. Whoops. Went to sleep here. The next piece I was going to speak to was the status of Vermont under No Child Left Behind, and I think it's been in the press, so probably most people in the audience are aware that we released a letter 2 weeks ago that explained to all community members and parents and caregivers that at this point, under the federal No Child Left Behind Act, all of the schools basically in Vermont are now considered low-performing schools under the requirements of federal law. And this is because under law, we are required to have 100% proficiency in every school in the state. And that's a standard that we feel that if you brought Singapore here and dropped it right into the middle of Vermont, that Singapore schools wouldn't make either. There are many reasons that do that, where schools might not have 100% proficiency, particularly if you're choosing challenging standards. And that will happen all the more if and when we transition to, we are transitioning to the Smarter Balance Assessment. And so we really felt it was important to make a statement that helps parents and caregivers and school boards and teachers, people who are really invested in education of children, as well as the broader community and business interests who have a vested interest in ensuring that we are preparing students to thrive in workforce and careers. We need to, as a state, engage in a more sensible discussion about what the data is on school performance and what it tells us. And this is in no way to shirk away from the deep commitment and the strong responsibility we feel, both for improving outcomes for all children and also ensuring that all children are demonstrating high-quality evidence of high-quality learning. And so we don't shrink from that. At the same time, we're mindful that we are subject to a policy that's broken. And currently, originally there were 4 non-waiver states. Now, by our count, there's 8. And there's at least 3 more that are at high risk of losing their waivers. So we expect that we're going to have more company, not less company, over the next couple of years. That as states have tried to apply for and then meet the terms of waivers they've negotiated, they're finding that they're not able to, or that they're unwilling to, because the commitments that they've made, they find actually don't serve the education of their children well.
And on behalf of the board, we commend you for that, and are pleased to see that letter is getting so much national attention, and that's really to your credit, and that's great. We will be addressing the same issue this afternoon in an agenda item, and we won't expect to get the same national news that you do, but we need to figure out a way to be effective. The agency and the board, I'm quite sure, are in 100% agreement on how we should be approaching the measurement of the child's education.
Great.
And I'll leave it at that.
I think he's telling me to hurry up.
No, I'm not. No, what I'm saying is that, you know, from a board point of view or an agency point of view, Vermonters should be proud that, you know, we have taken a very strong position against the flawed legislation, No Child Left Behind, and we're not getting anywhere yet, but we will.
Right. And I think it bears repeating, because I've had several people ask me this, which is why Vermont hasn't pursued a waiver. And the sticking point in the waiver has consistently been the requirement that we subject our teachers to evaluation based on the use of the performance of their students on standardized test scores. And we are very concerned because the value-added models or the growth models are useful if they correctly predict who will be the teacher who adds a lot of growth in the following year. So even if you don't agree with using test scores as a single measure of teachers, the whole premise is that they will accurately predict who's effective. And what we're seeing in our own data and we're seeing in the research data is that these tools are highly unreliable, and we might be in a position of using these data to fire the teachers who are actually the most effective teachers, and we can't subject our system to a tool that is going to arbitrarily fire teachers who might actually be the teachers who are most effective. And then the other concern we really have is that the testing that we're required to use is grade level testing, which means if, for example, you're in 8th grade, the items on the test are designed to test how well you've achieved the 8th grade curriculum. And there's items that are a little bit harder up to about 10th grade, items that are a little easier, maybe down to about 6th grade. So within that band, you can get some sense of what students have learned. However, for students who are substantially below grade level or substantially above, you cannot pick that up on that test because that test is either far too easy or far too hard. And the problem, again, with some of these tools is we had a couple teachers who spoke eloquently this morning about the privilege of working with students who really need the best and the most skilled teachers. And we want to be a state that encourages and inspires our educators to run to that challenge and embrace that challenge of teaching the students who most need high quality teaching. And we're very concerned that these tools would disincentivize that and would discourage teachers from embracing that challenge. So that's the short answer on why we've resisted a waiver.
Yes, go ahead.
So some of us have been on the board a while longer than others, and certainly a little bit longer than the secretary. So I want to comment that this board actually went through the process of looking at the waiver, applying for a waiver, designing the waiver that we thought was right for Vermont, and in the end, the powers that be in Washington didn't accept it.
Correct.
And this board wasn't willing to change some of those pieces to make it comply with what they wanted. So it wasn't that we didn't apply or we don't have a waiver, is that the waiver that we wanted wasn't accepted at the government, at the top level there.
My memory is that because of that, we didn't submit.
Right, because they wouldn't
right.
take it.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're currently listed as not having applied, though I think that you went through a series of negotiations to try to introduce flexibility. And in our subsequent conversations, we have found that flexibility means flexibility out of No Child Left Behind, but into use of standardized test-based evaluation of teachers.
Well, I just want to make sure that, it wasn't that we just decided we're not going to do it.
No, I know. Yes, absolutely. No, I think it was a long and thoughtful process. Right. Yeah. And I think also going forward, we have a number of answers to this. We are in no way at the agency, and I know the state board is not, because of listening to you and really hearing you engage and grapple with some really hard issues and think about your own strategic planning process and your process moving forward. I think we share a commitment to not shrink away from what we see as a real challenge. We know that we are serving particularly children who are coming from more affluent families and educated families very, very well. We outscore the nation on the National Assessment of Education progress. What we are not doing as well is narrowing the achievement gap. And actually, if you look at the Vermont data on NAEP, the achievement gap in 8th grade math, for example, is actually widening. So we think this is really another data point that we should use to leave behind where we've been. We don't want to, as is the common parlance in Washington, double down on a policy that's actually aggravating the kind of inequity that we're really committed to addressing. So going forward, I think we have an answer in the education quality standards, and the agency is working hard to support the implementation of the education quality standards. We have a new hire. You met our new hire this morning. her job is going to be to embrace this challenge of improving and supporting professional development of educators in the state. She's extremely skilled and experienced with respect to training principals and supervision and evaluation. She's got a tremendous experience in the classroom, supervising teachers and working with teachers to support improvements in practice. And we're really excited about the capacity that that new hire has given us to address the issue of educator quality and working in partnership with our teachers, not to single out or sanction, but to really embrace this hard work of improving practice. If it was easy, our schools would have done it already. I think you heard testimony today from these teachers about how passionately committed they are to this challenge of improving equity and outcomes for all students. So we need to reboot, we need to step back and really look at this differently, and we're excited to have that leadership there. We are also working on with the Great Schools Partnership to do a pilot of performance-based assessments of proficiency, targeting first the transferable skills, because we feel that's the hardest to assess, and it's the place where throwing a little state support behind that kind of initiative will be most productive. And so we are working hard to first pilot that with the League of Innovative Schools, to involve educators in the process of developing these tools, calibrating these tools, figuring out how they could be applied in the context of our Vermont education system. We're also working, we've applied for a grant to support work around school climate and culture. We are now partnering with professors from UVM, educators from the field and agency staff to develop and select some criteria for surveys of parents, students, and teachers, which will address issues around school climate and safety. Another thing you heard from the candidates this morning was how children need to feel safe. They need to feel valued in schools before they can even come to the education table. And these surveys should give schools some data that they could use to think about what their next level of work is. Is it to really double down on academics, or do they really need to look at their culture and whether they've created an environment in which children even feel safe taking risks? Because that might be the first barrier for some schools. And we're looking forward to that work as well. We're also working on proficiency-based graduation and trying to figure out what that will actually look like in process. The feedback we're getting from the teachers who are beginning to really grapple with this is, oh my goodness, this is much bigger than we thought. And this is going to be a long process, and we can't expect schools to reorient and retune around that ambitious goal in a couple years. It will take time, and I'm going to ask on their behalf that we support and encourage the innovation and risk-taking that's necessary to help realize that promise of proficiency-based education and a model that's based on documenting growth and strengths as opposed to sanctions for students who don't meet externally identified benchmarks. And we will continue to try to find ways to provide targeted grants, small grants, to districts that want to grapple with this challenge, on the understanding that then their responsibility to share back the work they've done, so it's available to other educators across the state. We will also continue to support the development of comprehensive local assessment systems, starting with a needs assessment. We will ask school districts what they feel their strengths and their weaknesses are with respect to the use of data-informative assessment to improve learning, and we will also figure out what kind of professional development we may need to support them and help them develop comprehensive local assessment systems that they can really use to look closely at learning and growth and progress in their own schools to develop locally appropriate solutions to some of those educational challenges. And in addition, we will be beginning, and we are just beginning to grapple with the structure of education quality reviews. We're mindful of the need to remain compliant with No Child Left Behind, which requires that all schools who fail to make AYP have in place an improvement plan. And what we're trying to figure out is how to make the improvement plan that schools fulfill or follow and develop be the same one that they have to use for special education, OSEP, the same one that they have to use for AYP determination processes, and also the one that really helps them locally target and identify their own goals for improvement. The problem is we have so many initiatives coming on, some of them push from the federal level, some from the state level. We need to make sure that the front that we present to the schools is coherent and that it's really rooted in the education quality standards. So what our teams have done internally at the agency is they've begun to crosswalk all these compliance obligations against the work or implied in the education quality standards, so we can develop a coherent review process that meets the requirements of No Child Left Behind, as long as we're still subject to it, but also really frees up schools to focus on many sources of data and then develop a local continuous improvement process that really yields, we think, better outcomes, hopefully, for students. And in addition to that, we will encourage development of performance assessments across all critical outcomes in the education quality standards. Another thing you heard from the Teachers of the Year today was that it isn't just English, language, arts, and math, that we need students who are prepared to go out and serve in democratic institutions and society. We need students who are capable of artistic expression. Music brings kids to school, all sorts of other things, and these are all critical priorities of the board, and we will be providing technical assistance to schools to develop, and we have provided some guidance about proficiency progressions within each of those 7 critical outcomes. In addition, we'll continue to support your commitments to equity by supporting the expansion of opportunities to learn in pre-K and after school and summer programming. We know that 2/3 of the achievement gap, if we're similar to what's reflected in the national research, is developed out of school. That kids arrive at kindergarten already demonstrating learning gaps, and we need to expand pre-K and access to high-quality opportunities to learn. And we need to support parents as the first teachers of their children in those critical 0 to 5 years, so that parents can support their children. We can work together as partners to really help all children get a healthy, positive start. And continue to support the complex languages, multi-tiered systems of support for all learners. I think the way the board has conceived it is, instead of asking the students to come to the school, we're asking, have we created a school where all children are actually able to succeed, because we've created an environment that's supportive from them and helps them connect the work they do in school to whatever it is that motivates them. And that will continue to be part of our process.
Great.
Thanks.
Wonderful report. Thank you. We'll move on now to item K.
Still has a question.
One real quick question, but maybe not so quick answer. The agenda you just outlined is the correct one, and it's a good agenda, and the pieces fit. But I'm still back to the chairman's question of where do we get the horses, and do you have the capacity and the depth of personnel that you need? It's very important that we do these things, but I'm worried.
I think there's several, and I'm not trying to be evasive, I think there's several things we're not clear on. We're not clear what will happen in terms of reauthorization, though we expect it's 3 years out, and it's very possible that if there is a reauthorization of the SEA, that there may be some flexibility, for example, in how often we test, and that might free up resources for other critical state priorities. There also are places that we could probably achieve efficiencies. We are worried about resources going forward. We're mindful that next year is going to be a very tough budget year for the state, and I think part of our challenge at the agency is to try to figure out how to use the resources most effectively. And what we are seeing is that the places where we have been most effective in creating models and moving the work of the field is where we have really involved teachers through strategic use of small incentive grants to develop models that then can be shared and disseminated. So I think an example of that is the personalized learning plan, which has really gained traction. I think we're getting a lot of progress in terms of implementation of PLPs. And that was done because we set some clear criteria for program development. We provided grants to districts to begin to develop models of what that would look like, and then came back and then provide professional development to support implementation and further development of those. So I think I think we will all have to continuously ask ourselves, what is our goal, and what is the most high leverage, cost-effective way to achieve that goal without sacrificing the quality we aspire to. It's the same conversation at the agency that I'm sure the school board members here are probably having in their own communities. We are in a tight fiscal environment, there's no question about that. We all are going to have to ask ourselves repeatedly with every decision, is this the most effective way to achieve the desired goals for our students?
Much more to come on that, I'm sure, Bill. Let's move on to item K, Chittenden-East SU MUD report. So what I'm suggesting to the board, as difficult as it will be, if you can hold your questions until we get done with all these presentations, and then we'll proceed from there. So get your pads out and write some notes down if to move along. Vaughn, briefly, the agency's point of view on this. You notice how I always say briefly to Vaughn?
And emphasize it. I've noticed that as well, Mr. Chair. Vaughn Altimus, the Agency of Education. Secretary Holcomb's recommendation is that the State Board of Education should approve the Chittenden-East Modified Unified Union School District Voluntary Merger Committee report which calls for all elementary districts to vote on whether to form a modified unified union district. It's important to keep in mind that the Secretary isn't recommending that the State Board of Education approve or endorse the proposal. The question the Secretary considered when making her recommendation, and the Secretary is asking you to consider, is whether the Voluntary Merger Committee's report should be submitted to the voters of the member districts for consideration. In other words, not that the board is in favor of it, but that the board believes it is in a condition where it's reasonable for the voters in each of the communities to have the discussion and then have a vote. I won't go into modify unified union school district in case there are questions. I'll be happy to answer, but I think people are generally aware of the fact that there were a number of regional education district votes where a majority of districts supported the regional education district, and a minority of districts, or in some cases one single district, opposed it, and under the law at that time, that was enough to stop the process. There were several districts, Chittenden East or SU's, Chittenden East prominent among them, that went to the legislature and made the case that the result was actually not local control, but the ability of one locality to exercise a veto over a majority of other localities. And the result was that the legislature passed the Modified Unified Union School District bill.
Which is commonly referred to as Act 156?
It's one piece of Act 156. It's in Act 156.
I just was making sure the board was up.
And it was amended further in Act 56, which expanded the authority. They can set a number larger than a majority. They can name necessary, but absolutely.
Good. Thank you, Vaughn.
And so I believe that
is there someone
Katie and Mr. Marks and Mr. Peabody are here for the majority position.
If you gentlemen would start by introducing yourselves, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marks, I'm the chair of the Voluntary Merger Committee. Seated to my left is John Alberghini, the superintendent of the Chittenden East Supervisory Union. Seated to my right is Christopher Leopold, who has been legal counsel both to the Voluntary Merger Committee and to our supervisory union. And seated to my far right is John Malazzo, who is the vice chair of the committee and also chair of the Richmond Elementary School Board. And in my spare time, I serve as a member of the Mount Mansfield Union School Board. So I appreciate the opportunity to present to you today our work as a merger committee. And it has been a long process to bring us to this moment. The Chittenden East Supervisory Union conducted a very extensive study of a regional education district in 2010 and 2011 that ultimately resulted in a vote in which 4 of our communities approved the merger and 2 turned it down. And consequently, of course, under the structure that was then in place, the merger failed. That was, though, a very healthy process for our communities. It gave us an opportunity to stop, think, and discuss what are the things that we really are concerned about in terms of school governance, and should we be rethinking the model that we had in place in our supervisory union. Now, ours, like many in Vermont, is a unique model. For 50 years, we have educated our children in grades 5 through 12 through the Mount Mansfield Union School District. But we've also maintained 6 distinct elementary school districts educating our children in grades pre-K through 4. And of course, as a consequence, to bind all that together, we have a supervisory union. And if one adds up the total membership, we have 56 distinct and, I might say, highly opinionated members of 8 different boards who govern education in a school district that for 50 years has combined to educate all its children in grades 5 through 12. Now, board members and community members and staff members, in response to the red, thought some more. And the more we reflected on it, I would say there was a growing sentiment, certainly not a unanimous sentiment, but a growing sentiment, that in order to provide effectively for the education of children, to efficiently manage resources, and also to allow our administrators the ability to devote their time to working on educational issues, as opposed to coordinating governance decisions, that we needed a better model. Now, in response to this, in part, and into other issues around the state, the legislature adopted the Modified Unified Union School District. And in a nutshell, what it says is that communities have the opportunity, if a majority of the elementary school districts concur, to form a unified school district, and those opting out would continue to maintain their elementary school governance, but those opting in would have a unified structure for all students and expenditures, grades pre-K through 12. So the boards of our district unanimously voted to open a study process, and I guess I drew the short straw, so I got to be chair of the study committee, and we began our work intensively in November of last year. And we've had a total of 14 public meetings, including a community forum for the entire district. We have studied numerous background documents, both in our committee and outside on our individual efforts. We've taken public comment at all our public meetings, and what you have in front of you is the fruit of our effort. In a nutshell, the majority of us, and I know there are those who disagree, and I would count them my neighbors and my friends. And I respect their viewpoints and ask you to consider their viewpoints and respect them as well. But the majority of us have reached the following conclusions. One, that it does not make sense to have fragmented government, especially for a community like ours. Two, that as we face some of the pressures that we now see in our schools, that is a luxury we cannot afford. In our last go-around, we had 3 of our local school budgets defeated on the first try, and for the high school, that was something that was virtually unprecedented in recent memory. 2 of our elementary schools, small elementary schools, report to us that in the absence of the efficiencies that they think they can obtain if they are part of a unified district, and also because of the state funding mechanism, which, as we know, places penalties on schools that exceed the excess spending threshold, that they see their schools in serious jeopardy. And our administrators report to us that their ability to provide the kind of educational leadership that we expect from them, and which we know they are fully capable of providing, is something that's simply handicapped. And those key considerations led us to realize that as a majority, we think we need to move forward. We think we need to present to the voters this option, and we believe it is an option that provides for our communities a viable alternative so that we can consider the education of students on a continuous basis from the moment they enter our system till the day that they graduate, so that we can evaluate budgetary decisions not in 8 isolated segments, but on a cohesive whole for all of our students, so that we can, where efficiencies are available, and surely they are available, employ them by uniting services and staff as opposed to having the artificial barriers that stop us today. Now, I know you will be hearing dissenting viewpoints, well articulated, I am sure, and passionately held, and I ask you, as I said before, to consider them. But in the end, I hope that you will realize that this is an idea, at least in our supervisory union, whose time has come. And it is time for us to give the voters a chance to evaluate the hard work and the careful consideration that we as a committee have provided. So I don't know if there are any questions at this time, or you'd like to defer them, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to defer them.
I have one factual question.
We'll allow the member from Goshen to ask.
You said unanimously agreed to move forward after the red went down or the pre-mud went down. You said the 6 towns voted unanimously. Did that include the 2 who had defeated it before?
Each of the 6 elementary boards voted to open this study to assess whether a modified unified union district would be in the best interest of the supervisory union.
Thank you.
Has a date been set, assuming that this passes today? When are the towns going to be voting on this?
The towns would be voting at the November general election, and parenthetically, that was a critical part of our deliberations, Mr. Chairman. The November general election was one where we thought we could maximize public participation. That's right. And if we failed to meet that date, we would be obligated to put this off for a whole nother year's budget cycle, because when you fit all the dates together for budget hearings and election of school board members, they don't work. And frankly, 2 of our small school districts told us they didn't have time to wait, and we felt in the end as a committee that we had pretty exhaustively, certainly exhaustingly, but exhaustively researched and studied the issue.
Do any of you other 3 gentlemen have anything you'd like to add at this point? It was a great presentation, so I don't know if you have anything more, but you're more than welcome to speak. No?
Thank you.
You'll be here, so if we have questions later.
We're not leaving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to just say that this was really well put together, including the minority report and your response. We got color versions, which even helped. I applaud. You can see that a lot of time and effort went into this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
I'm
plenty.
trying to help you out over here. Don't want you running.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Thank you.
we're aware that that there was a minority report through this study. Is someone here representing the minority? Would you kindly introduce yourself before you start?
Is that in a good place for you to hear? My name is Meg Keir. I'm an elementary school board member from Huntington, Brewster Pierce Elementary School, and I sit as a committee member for the merger study. And I did write the minority report. I've been in touch with many people in my extended community, particularly Richmond and Huntington, because I live sort of in both those communities, and have spent quite a bit of time in both those communities, having worked in the library in Richmond as well as put my children through school in Huntington. I have not prepared a careful statement. I don't know if you folks have had a chance to read my minority statement. I do have prepared responses to the response, but I won't burden you with that unless you would like to ask some questions about the committee's response to my minority report. I'll be happy to do so. But let me outline some of my concerns. First of all, I am not adamantly opposed to the concept of our 6 elementary districts and our 3 high schools, the 2 middle and the high school, working together more efficiently. I welcome the concept and would like to see a well-crafted study developed in which we could take the structure we have and build on it. I agree that we do work well together as a 5-town, 6-district community. One of my concerns actually is that this vote may be divisive to our communities rather than bringing us together as we are now. Because some of the reasons that people have for not wanting to proceed is the idea of a modified union in which some will be in and some will be out is not a positive thing. Meanwhile, what are the reasons why some people are reluctant? Well, there are several key points which I'll try to highlight here. Many folks came into this with an open mind in the community and asked, well, what is it we're trying to fix? The biggest problems in education primarily are in 2 big categories. One is cost, efficiency, and the other is the students who are falling between the cracks, the gap between the rich and the poor, and so those are the big issues we want to make sure we're addressing. And it's very important that if we're going to go through a big governance change, that we in fact are fixing these issues, because these are the issues that at the bottom of the day, at the end of the day, are what we need to be dealing with. It is not clear that this merger is going to save any money. And in fact, in the short run, Chittenden East will be the recipient of funds from the state, which will pay for transition, which is going to pay for lawyers and accountants. It's not going to pay for more education. There will be costs that we will get money from the state for incentives, tax incentives. So if it's not coming out of our pocket, it's coming out of somebody else's pocket in the state, because all that money comes out of the state. So as much as I am a taxpayer and love to see my property taxes reduced, because I do pay property taxes, I feel morally that it's very important that if we proceed with this, it shouldn't be just a shuffling of tax money where we in Chittenden East are getting an advantage that other people aren't. You'll see that the report does not claim to save much money. So that more or less has been admitted, that it's not going to be a big tax saver, or a big cost saver, but it may save us some taxes because of incentives. The bigger question then is, how is it going to improve education? Some folks are hoping that there will be some opportunities, but I do not feel that we as a committee carefully studied in a way that you could say is scientific and developing hypotheses and proving those hypotheses to show that we are going to have improved education. As far as our communities working well together, 50 years ago when our communities came together and literally built the middle schools and built the high school, we of course have worked together well as the 5 communities for that. And it does work well. When you're talking about the elementary schools, the children go to school in their own communities, and I don't think anybody wants to see the elementary students join together, traveling far. So we're talking about the same buildings that have been built by individual communities where there's a lot of local involvement. And I would hope that we could continue that, whether we join together as a unified district or remain as we are. However, it concerns me that we were unable to reach any decision about whether to allow for something called a school council. One reason I would like to delay the proceeding with this is that there's several things that I do feel we need to consider more carefully before we make this big governance change. And one is that I'd like to see a provision developed through careful analysis and discussion for school councils, so that we as communities can feel that we're continuing to have local input into our schools. So I'd like to see that develop before we say, yes, let's go ahead with this. Some other things that I'd like to see worked on before we proceed. This merger is going to hopefully provide some new opportunities for elementary schools in choice. At least that is the expressed wish of the committee. This is probably particularly true for the 3 elementary schools that are geographically close. I am from a community that probably won't benefit from that, because geographically Chittenden East is a long, skinny geographic area, and we're at the very southern end. But Jericho, Underhill, and Underhill Center, they're close together. So they're hoping to see some opportunities for school choice. Something that has not been addressed is if school choice is the norm in a new system, how will transportation be dealt with? And will all students in this new unified district be allowed to go to any school? And will the district pay for that? That's an unanswered question I'd like to see studied. Another issue is that in talking about school choice, we are simply talking about elementary. We're not talking about changing any choices for the middle and high schools. Personally, having raised children from K right through college, my own sense is that if we were to say what are some of the issues we'd like to deal with to make better, I would see creating opportunities for more high school choice. We have a great high school. You know, don't get me wrong. I really like our high school. I like our middle schools. But I do feel that there's a very limited number of students in any community who might want to study something such as Arabic or Japanese or high-level engineering courses. And you can only do that, perhaps, by joining in with larger districts or larger entities. So myself, I would see looking at studying school choice, merger opportunities that would give high school kids more opportunities, not just the elementary. And if we're going to spend all this money to do a merger, I'd like to get the merger right. So I would add that to my list of things that are undone. Another issue that hasn't been addressed with the transportation is, since we are bound by No Child Left Behind, I believe that within a district, if one school is not providing adequately and another is, that I believe that that guarantees that those students have the opportunity to go to other schools in the district. Again, that's a transportation issue. Are we, as a new school district, going to be obligated to provide transportation costs? That's a question I'd like to see addressed. I also feel that the communities that are now paying taxes have unanswered questions that the committee has not looked into. There's been a lot of talk about how it's going to save taxes, but that really is kind of a smoke and mirrors thing because it's just money coming from the state. There's been no description pulled together of all the school assets and liabilities, and I think that voters should have that. They should see, you know, I'm from a community that has perhaps a lower tax rate than some of the other districts in Chittenden East, so we have less of a motivation because our taxes are already manageable. But I do think that districts like ourselves may face higher taxes down the road once the incentives are done because our budget is more contained than some of the others. So I do feel like that needs to be looked into. I'd like to make a point also about the process. As I said, I represent the Brewster Pierce School Board on the committee. I came to the committee representing my school board with the understanding that we were going to be studying merger options. We had been presented at the joint school board meeting, and I'd like you to know that we do hold joint elementary school board meetings already, so it's not as if this can't happen. But at our April joint school board meeting, or carousel meeting, we were presented with the new description of the merger law and the different merger options that had been created by the amended law, which included such things as a Union Elementary District, and outlined the various incentives and transition monies that were available. I was under the understanding and it was spelled out to us at our school board meeting, that we would be discussing as a merger committee the various merger options. However, the merger committee from day one considered only the modified unified school merger option. I feel that was a mistake, and that more discussion of merger options should have been considered. One of my biggest concerns, and I'll try to wrap this up, one of my biggest concerns is that right now we have a terrific high school. We've got a very functional, busy high school board with 15 members. They're dealing with the curriculum and issues, age-appropriate issues for middle and high school. If we pass this modified unified union school district change, we will have the same size school board, but we will no longer have all the elementary boards that are looking in on the individual elementary schools. Instead, we will have the same size board managing what they're managing now, but also managing 6 additional elementary school buildings, which are up to an hour apart from each other. Each building is in a community where the community members are familiar with the school, but from one end of the district to the other, we all aren't acquainted with each other's buildings and its issues. So the oversight of the facilities and the oversight of pre-K through 12 is all going to happen by the same number of people, one school board. This is one reason, again, I feel like we need to talk seriously about school councils before we go ahead with this.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I assume you'll be available if questions come up later on. Now, I'm assuming that there are other members of the public that would like to address this issue here. Yes, in the back there. Could you come to the table and introduce yourself? In the interest of time, I would ask everyone to be as concise and to the point as you possibly can, so we get the benefit of what you have to say, but we get to come to a conclusion this afternoon. Start with your names, please.
So my name is Suraj Kushwaha, and this is my brother Akash, and I'm a rising senior at Mount Mansfield, and
I'm going to be a sophomore.
Yeah.
And you're brothers, but you're together on this issue, or
yeah,
that's unusual.
It's true. It's true. I wanted to come for you today to advise against the merger, or even proposition of it coming to a vote. I'm well aware of the financial difficulties that we're facing. I'm actually a student member of MMU's Finance Committee. And earlier this summer, I actually had the privilege to be elected Lieutenant Governor of Boise State, which is a camp that is like a mock state government, in which we passed a bill against this kind of merger with complete consensus. I'm extremely proud of the education that this district provides. And it seems to me that the movement to redistrict, while it may seem logical, is in reality a drastic overcorrection in response to increased taxes and the desire for a quick fix. It would be easy to consolidate school boards and not have to deal with the messiness that arises from many people holding power in school decisions, but that would be rejecting the messiness that's inherent to democracy, the basic ideal in which our government functions. And when I have kids, I know I want to raise them in Vermont because I know what a great education the state can provide. And I implore you to please reconsider any action that has even the slightest chance to prove detrimental to the standard. America's great because so many people have a voice and so many people can impact decisions. Likewise, our school system, I believe there's an analogy there, is great because there are so many people across the multitude of school boards, 8 I believe is mentioned, that have a say and that really care about their close to home schools. Decreasing this number of people by consolidating the power in one school board, I believe, will jeopardize the integrity, just the attention that these people will be able to give. There won't be as many people to give attention across the different schools. And eventually even the quality of our education could decrease. I ask that you please don't let this happen, as Vermont certainly needs all the attraction it can get right now to keep young people like myself and my brother in the state, knowing that it's a great place to live and an excellent place to raise educated children. Yeah.
And would you like to add something?
These small local schools, of which I spent 4 years in, are very important for the development of all children, obviously. And BPMS, Brewster Pierce Memorial School, the school my brother and I both went to, I feel that they excelled at their duty to educate both of us. And I believe this is so because these small local schools have enough time and have enough space to focus on individuals, not the success of an entire group, but the success of every single student at each school.
And not only are these schools part of our school system, but they're community centers owned by the community, which I believe, if I understand it correctly, this redistricting would put that ownership of the schools eventually into a much smaller group of people. They're owned by the community, and just from personal experience, we've been involved in scouting, which is held at Brewster Pierce, involved in Tang Soo Do, local martial art that the instructor holds at Brewster Pierce. And it's not just like the decisions about who gets to use that space should be made by people within those communities. That's what we believe.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
Are there other? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself.
Sure. First, thanks for the opportunity. I'm Bob Lowe. I'm a resident of Richmond since 1970. I can be brief because, as you know, I presume my wife and I have sent you a letter which details the reasons why we do not favor a modified district but would like to see a full merger take place. You also will realize, if you've looked at that document, that I have spent my entire adult life in education, all the way from university provost to member of the MMU board. I'll be teaching some of the CES graduates next week. They are wonderful. I will speak for myself. I guess basically I want to say I have found what has unfolded most troubling in my experience in all levels of education, most troubling by a wide margin, I think, because of the process that took place. You have before you the issues that I put forward in the letter, so I won't say very much about them. I will just simply iterate some of the things that were said already about process and then make a recommendation to you as to what I think you should do. The issues that I raised had to do with the top-down nature and the closed nature of this process, which you've heard about before. I concluded long ago it was a foregone conclusion. I noted lack of responsiveness to community input as best I can tell from my direct experience and reading minutes. I see no evidence of evaluation of the pros, cons, the basis of a decision and the rationale for coming to them. As a professional scientist, I always look for that in my scientific life. I always look for that in my administrative life as an academic leader. New perspectives, you'll note perhaps if you want to go back to the March 3rd, 2011 Volunteer Committee minutes, where it is specified the committee was to look at advantages and disadvantages. I haven't seen any discussion since of the disadvantages. If you look at the frequently asked questions, last updated December 16th, 2013, the recommendation was that the school districts must approve the recommendation before it goes to the state. And finally, the volunteer committee charge for the iteration of the last committee has the word evaluation. Consolidation is highly desirable. I think it's essential that it be done right for the benefit of our children's education, and I would urge that this process continue. My recommendation to you is as follows. I think I would recommend you send this back to the volunteer committee, asking them for a time-certain revision which demonstrates broader community membership and input, evidence-based evaluation and recommendations. What is the issue? What is the background? What are the alternatives? What was the choice and why? And clear evidence of what I think in the record says is a promised two-way community dialogue. This is really critical for the education of our kids, as you've just heard. I think it's going too fast. I very much want to see a consolidation that I think will work. I'm worried that this one may cause getting to yes in that regard to take much longer and be much more difficult. And I can sit ready for questions about what I just said or what is in the letter.
Let me ask you a brief question. As the report indicated, or the reporters of the report indicated, that the vote is, assuming approval here today, would be scheduled for November of this year. And so when I asked the question about that date, he gave a pretty thorough answer about the effect of what would happen if it wasn't this November as opposed to next year sometime. Mm-hmm. And your recommendation is to go back to the committee and revise, work on some things. My question is, what's your response to the urgency on the vote?
One of my concerns has been, in fact, the urgency. This was a self-imposed urgency by the structure at CESU. I think that we have to watch out for the trap that says there are individuals out there who want to put this aside forevermore and never get us to yes, which I'm adamantly against. I think a year is a very short time to look at some of the issues that I and my wife in this case raised in our letter to you. I think they are answerable. In fact, they already may be answered. I cannot, however, endorse a process where I am not provided the rationale for what I'm supposed to vote on. So I think a year is okay in that regard. I would like you to ask why it is not.
We did, and I thought we got answers from that, but we won't go over that. Any other questions or no? Thank you very much, sir.
Bill has a question.
Oh, Bill, I'm sorry.
One question, you made a quote that I wanted to explore. You said the school board must approve the plan before it goes to the state. Can you be more specific on that? And does that mean that each of the 6 boards has to approve it? What's the language?
I can't go any further than the following. Excerpts from frequently asked questions last updated 12/16/13. If the committee recommends unification, the recommendation must be reviewed by our local school districts. Then the State Board of Education would have to approve the recommendation prior to submission to the voters. That's not my words. That was a frequently asked questions, and I don't know if they're still operative, but that's what it said.
That's an important question.
Juan, can you respond to that?
There is a provision, Mr. Chairman, that that boards are to be given the opportunity to review the report. The legislature debated giving them the opportunity to approve it, and the House Education Committee felt what was likely to happen was the way the representatives of each community felt at the beginning was likely to be the way the board still felt, and compromises that had been worked out over a period of months and years would quite possibly come undone. So they gave the opportunity for input, but not approval, and presumably the committee was to take any input they received and include it in their deliberations.
If you would look at the...
Mr. Chairman, did you have something you want to add to that answer?
Yes, if I can, Mr. Chairman. The law requires that the report at some point be submitted to the local school boards for their review and comment. It does not require their approval. And our process, as outlined in the December frequently asked questions and as actually followed, was that the draft of the report was submitted to the school boards. There were extensive comments received from them. And then we met again in public meeting, debated them, deliberated them, and they are reflected, at least in some sense, in the final report that you have.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I would simply ask you to look at the record of the submission of the final report as you have seen it, and look at the issue as to whether the elementary boards have even met since that final report was sent to you.
Thank you very much. Are there other members, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members of the public that wish to address the board? Ma'am? And then you next, ma'am. And please state your name.
My name is Allison Anand. I'm a career educator, business owner, and environmental planner. I'm an 8th generation Vermonter. I was educated in Montpelier, Vermont, and at the University of Rochester, and I hold 2 master's degrees from the University of Vermont. I have been a teacher for over 50 years and spent about 11 years teaching in Chittenden East School District. A few years teaching at the high school level and a few at the elementary school level. I sent you a memo this morning. I don't know if you got it or not, but I also brought some hard copies if anyone needs them. And regarding this memo, I would just like to say that I believe that the people who crafted Act 153 believed that it would improve education. They did not realize that it was part of a pattern of laws which have the agenda of the overt agenda of improving education and the covert agenda of privatizing education at public expense, which has been shown actually to widen the achievement gap. So I am more concerned about some of the issues that the previous speaker spoke about. The process of the committee has been pretty much of a railroad process, and people with opposing points of view have not only been discouraged, but they haven't been treated very well in some cases. So I'm sad to report that, but it's true, I've seen it. However, I would like to address a different matter that hasn't really come up. Recognizing that it's the responsibility of this board to work with the existing law, that you have before you a proposal for merger from Chittenden East. Given that there's considerable disagreement and concern in the community about this matter, it might seem logical in a democratic spirit to bring it to a public vote. However, in this case, that would be a tragedy on a scale far greater than the issues of this merger, for the simple reason that the law contains elements of corruption. The law is unfair to the voter in several ways. Number one, the issue is so complex that it is impossible to describe a clear ballot question. Number two, this is not a true vote because not all the facts are being presented. Number three, the voter is in the no-win position because there is a detrimental consequence to the voter for voting either yes or no. A community voting no loses its supervisory union and bears an unfair tax burden to compensate for the advantage given to the communities voting yes. Yet the community voting yes loses their school building and or the real estate assets in the building, making it impossible to reverse the merger if it's considered a failure. A yes vote is encouraged by perceived advantages, especially financial gains which have no real basis, using public funds to give financial advantages to people for voting for a certain agenda has been proven illegal in other situations. This is actually bribery. A law so seriously flawed cannot be considered to be in the public good. This raises the matter to the level of a constitutional issue. Referencing Articles 7 and 8 of the Vermont State Constitution, the public has a right to demand that the legislature pass laws that are for the public good and that elections be without corruption. Neither criterion is met by the present law, Acts 153 and 156, especially Section 17, the Mudd Law. It would be an ironic travesty for the cause of education to unintentionally promote corruption by allowing the matter to come to a public vote. There are many legislators who are aware that the law needs to be improved, and I know they're working on it. I've spoken with many of them. There's no need to rush into this. This is another reason, other than the ones you've already heard, not to rush into this. As a Chittenden East School Board District School Board member, I'm a member of the Mount Mansfield Union School Board. I thank you for your efforts on behalf of education in Vermont, and particularly Secretary and those that have worked with you. I thank you for your efforts about the No Child Left Behind law.
Thank you. Ma'am?
I have a copy of what I want to say, and I'm very, very hard to stick to it, so I can talk for 3 minutes. First, I want to make a comment that...
Your name first, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was going to be in my letter here.
Oh, okay.
My name is Joanne Conley, and I'm from the town of Huntington, and I've been observing the CESU Merger Planning Committee from their second meeting until the present, and with few exceptions. The comment that I want to make, though, quick before I read statement is that Mr. Mathis, you asked a question about whether all the school districts voted to study and assume that they were all going to be for the continued study and passage of this planning committee's proposal. They voted for a study, but they did not necessarily vote for the planning commission, commissioners or the committee's proposal. So that's what they actually voted for, not that they agreed with the merger committee. I thought that was really important to make. And the other thing is, though 4 towns voted for it and 2 towns voted against it, all towns had yes and no. As a matter of fact, across the district, the vote was 0.1% to being 50-50. So that makes a big difference here. Okay, dear Secretary Holcomb and members of the State Board of Education, I am Joanne Conley from the town of Huntington, and I've been an observer of the committee. I went at first out of the curiosity of their procedures, but I continued because it was immediately obvious that this group was an overwhelming of one mind. In their 3rd meeting, homework was suggested for the committee members to email their concerns and questions to the chairman, and he would print out their queries to be shared for discussion at the next meeting. I participated in this exercise, even though I was just an observer, and handed out my list of my own questions to the committee. Some of the committee refused my questions and handed my list back to me, or left them on the tables unread. As for the committee, even their own questions, the committee members, were never discussed. At the next meeting, an informal vote was taken to assess the support of the merger plan. Out of 15, there were 2 that were not ready to vote. They had no decision yet, and 1 for a no vote. There has been no forum for those no voters and all those undecided citizens to answer their questions. voice their concerns, and receive concrete, realistic, and appropriate answers. At this point, which is early in the study, just the 4th meeting, a very biased committee boarded the train, sped down the track at full speed towards approval of their report. This was a non-stop ride. No need to study or pick up passengers with alternative or opposing opinions. I take extreme exception to the committee's claim that there was representation and support among all the 6 school districts. I believe the truth is that people chosen from the 6 boards to be on the committee were either self-appointed or recruited for their support of the merger plan. The committee has repeated many times that they believe they were mandated to get this merger plan passed. There was no discussion or debate with anyone from the communities. The chair limited all public comment to a few minutes with absolutely no dialogue coming from the committee. None of the questions were addressed with community members. Most of the questions were never even discussed by the committee in a public forum. Even the one public forum that they did hold, that they called, there were other meetings that Huntington School called, and probably in other districts, but the one public forum that they did call was absolutely no dialogue occurred. It was it was simply an extended public comment time. The minority report that you heard and were sent by the one no vote is the valid aspect of the committee, and it's the only valid aspect. This person did an amazing amount of research and all that and asked very good questions and has been the most polite person on the committee. I sent you a packet of numerous opinions from lifelong experienced career educators for your review. Education happens in the classroom. Why has no one consulted these educators, including our own teachers? They would be the ones that you would ask to write a decent proposal for change and improvement in our schools. Peter Berger put it best. You can't know what works for children unless you work with children. We have a great system in CESU, as the young men attested to. Children in schools do best when their parents and the community are involved. Vermont's small towns and their small classes and the local school boards, because they're our parents of the kids, they create the best environment here for learning. And I come from other states, and I've taught in other states, and our kids went to school in different districts and all that, and this is by far the most welcoming. You talked about making schools welcoming. I never saw anything like this. We had to cut out field trips because it's too dangerous. And I lived in nice suburbs too. This was not the big city. So the environment here is protective and homey and family, and they care. I see that the teachers care. I actually saw, when I first visited the school and volunteered, I saw teachers hug the kids. We weren't allowed to touch the kids.
Thank you very much.
That's how serious it was. And
yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Helen Keith. I'm a resident of Huntington, or Chittenden East Supervisory Union. I'm just about to get my master's in educational leadership at the University of Vermont, and I chose education finance reform as my internship. But my background is early childhood and family support services. I am here because I feel there are key issues that you need to consider, and I am hoping that you will send it back for another year's worth of study, actually to do study, to evaluate whether in fact there are merits there to go forward with. I do not feel that this has occurred. Some of the key issues for your consideration, if you check the cost-benefit analysis from 2011 when the red was defeated, it is word for word the same as the 2014 cost-benefit analysis. That, to me, as a planner, is like, how could you have 3 years apart, 4 years, and not be discussing the cost-benefit analysis in a new light? That bothers me. There was little to no discussion, taking the time to engage in consensus building or community building in any of this. And I was really hopeful that we would have that time, and then superimposed was the committee's actual self-imposed deadline of getting it to the August 19th board so that it could go to the November 4th, so that it could be implemented next July. Well, there's no reason why it can't be implemented the following July. My second issue is the pre-K through grade 4 elementary schools. The cost-benefit analysis, either one of them, does not really apply to them or even mention the younger child other than to be able to move staff and maybe children, which is not a best practice or even a good practice to generalize or to assume. This concerns me greatly, that a board might not even understand what it takes, relationship-based learning and understanding of brain development in young children, to provide high-quality services to this age population. I feel like they could get lost. We should be careful to do no harm. We've already got a good system. We don't want to harm kids. We can take care not to harm kids by doing this kind of planning and getting a foundation in place. The plan is too confusing. No one, not the committee, not the agency, not the state board, understands what is being proposed or how it will work. I really feel the sign is, if it's too confusing, vote no. I don't want to see that happen. I want to see a process where we can build consensus. There's little to no data to support the merger that's in this plan. There are enrollment histories, but no projections, exact or not. There is no listing of the assets and liabilities of each elementary school so that anyone knows what they're getting into financially. This should be public information and a part of the report. Data is missing. It is not going to save money. That is a myth, and I hope people plan to measure this over time if this does go through. It isn't going to help tax rates once the incentives are gone. This is a mythical Band-Aid. The proposed MUD, we have to have a sense of humor that the MUD indicates that there is a new treasurer's position. And that will be added to the staff, which is a really good thing. The tax collection responsibilities should also be transferred from the dissolved school districts and their town treasurers to this new position so that we can finally align the accountability piece with the anger that's happening in the community. So the education tax is collected by the town treasurer. That responsibility should be transferred to the new district, along with all the supposedly really good things that are going to happen. It would align the tax collection with the decision-making, and people would probably see that that isn't where the decisions are made, where that has to do with their taxes being increased. Yeah, we need some more evidence. Why don't you take it back and come back to us in another year? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark Perrin was my supervisor.
I need his name.
Oh, you need to say your name and location for the
Gail
minute.
Conley, sorry. I retired a year ago when Mark Perrin was my supervisor. 2 years before that, I retired from a year of being in Barrie. 21 years ago, I moved to Vermont from Illinois when I met the young Bill Mathis. And from then until now, I think he's the ultimate school administrator.
Let's get back to the subject at hand.
As you may or may not know, I've written and I'm strongly opposed to this kind of merger. I won't bore you with those 14 details I have in mind. I would draw your attention to, I think it's called Attachment A, Item 3. If this new union were to be voted in, if 1 or 2 towns vote no, you could assume they may or may not. We don't know. But last time on a red, we had 2 no votes from 2 towns. The union will go ahead with the other 6 towns, but the union board will still supervise our grades 5 through 12. So for example, today, when the Huntington voters go to vote for a budget, they vote for the elementary budget, then they have another budget for the 5-12 budget. That will have to continue. The merger committee on numerous times, having read through their paperwork,
discussed and rejected the idea of two budgets. There has to be a 612 budget for the no town. If you read item 3 on attachment A, it says, those citizens that voted not to be in the union have an opportunity to vote on the union budget, of which they're not a part. The new union budget will be elementary schools, the 4 towns that want to vote for it, and the 612 budget. It'll be a combined K-12 budget. Citizens that are in the town that said no, they don't want to be in that union and they have their own elementary school ought not be authorized to vote on the elementary budget in the union. That's the first question you ought to think about. The next question is, today when we vote on our 2 budgets, we vote on the elementary budget and the 512 union budget. As most SUs do, we commingle those votes before we count them. If 2 towns are not in the new union and they have a chance to vote, which they have to vote on their 512 budget if they're going to be taxed against it, who are they going to commingle their votes with? You can't commingle those votes with the union K-12 budget, apples and onions. Those kinds of issues, there are lots more of them, but those are the 2 biggest ones that I believe have to be clearly defined after discussion and debate with the merger committee and with Vaughn and the rest of the agency to make it clear if in fact we can take this to a vote. I don't believe there's any way technically we can define that to make sense and or to make it legal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a, yes.
Just, I have a question for Vaughn when we
Okay.
get back to it.
Let me call on the chair of the committee. Is there anything you want to say in conclusion?
No, I would just like to be able to respond to questions of the board at this point.
Okay. Why don't you take a seat, because there may be some questions. Stacy, you have a question for Vaughn, and maybe Vaughn, you want to come to the table too, if you don't mind.
I held my question this whole time. I don't know that
Well,
I've ever been so
some of you were-
successful
right.
holding a question.
Right.
Vaughn, I wanted to clarify. I found a discrepancy between the way you presented the green sheet and the way the recommended action is written. I just wanted to make sure I understood. I thought I heard you make a pretty clear distinction between we're not saying as a board if we support the merger as a conceptual idea or not. We are just voting on whether or not to put it to the ballot. But the way I read the green sheet, it says that the board finds that the proposed formation of the Chittenden East Modified Unified Union School District is in the best interest of students, the state, and school districts, and that the state therefore votes to approve the attached report. And I just want to make sure when we're thinking about voting that we understand what we're being asked there.
That's a good question. If you wanted to modify the
Modify the mud?
no, modify the approved motion, that could be done. Typically, simply because of statute, that's a fairly standard language, and I probably didn't think about it carefully enough.
You want to take a look at that before? Yes, sir.
I would direct the board's attention to 16 VSA, section 706C, subpart B.
In that we're not all handy with statute books here. What does it read it?
Well, the section I direct you to is, the language reads, if after due consideration and any further meetings as it may deem necessary, the board, referring to this board, finds that the formation of the proposed union school district is in the best interest of the state, the students, and the school district, it shall approve the report submitted by the committee, together with any amendments, as a final report of the study committee, and shall give notice of the action to the committee.
This proposed motion is almost verbatim of what you're reading from the statute.
That's right.
Where it comes
That's
from.
right. My point is that deviating from the statute may have legal consequences.
You can't split them. Okay.
And effectively, the result of accepting the Secretary's recommendation is to give voters the choice.
Yes. This is far from a final decision.
Absolutely.
Right, no,
Appreciate that.
but I guess, in terms of public perception, I think, for me personally, I think there's a distinction between wanting to give the people who live in those towns the right to vote on it, and whether or not we as a board sanction it as in the best interest of. And I think that
It did
just.
come from statute.
I see, okay, I'll make sure.
Mark?
Yeah, just to follow up just a little bit more on that, one of the things I got out of what you said, Vaughn, was, is this report in proper form? And I take seriously the message that we send by approving this report is in proper form, because obviously there's a lot of disagreement over that. And I don't read that in what's in the recommended action.
You don't read what, Mark?
That it's in proper form, the report.
Could you be more specific?
I don't quite know what you're asking.
In other words, if I were to approve the recommended action, according to the way you presented to us first time, is that we are saying that this report is in proper form.
It is in proper form to present to voters, yes. And I think it is, and recommended that to the secretary, who accepted my recommendation.
Okay.
Bill?
I've got two questions. The first is that if a town votes against the MUD, being a member of it, they continue outside the MUD, but the MUD could still be formed, right?
Not quite. If a town votes against it, they continue to govern their pre-K through grade 4 schools through their own school board.
Right.
But if the Modified Unified Union School District is approved, that town would have representation on its board, and its representatives would be proportioned to their current representation on the high school and junior high school board.
Can I just piggyback on that, Bill?
Sean Marie, you're recognized?
Can I piggyback on?
Yes.
So just to be clear.
Yes.
The union school districts, so this is an SU, right? Now you're talking about an SU? So.
No, we have,
Union
the Chittenden
school.
East Supervisory Union is a supervisory union. Within that supervisory union are the following school districts. The Mount Mansfield Union School District, which educates all children, grades 5 through 12.
It would continue.
And then there are 6 constituent elementary school districts, which educate children in each of their communities, grades pre-K through grade 4. And so if this were approved by 4 of the communities, the Modified Unified Union School District would be formed. And any community voting no would still have its own local elementary school district, but would have representatives on the Unified Union School Board.
So, and where does there's no supervisory union at this point?
What our proposal entails is the following. If all of the districts vote yes, then we would become a supervisory district.
Right, I got that part.
If 1 or 2 vote no, then there would continue to be a supervisory union. However, that supervisory union could operate in tandem with the Modified Union School Board. It would have representation from all the communities and additional representatives appointed from any elementary school board whose community had voted no, who would exercise their votes in a proportional fashion.
So you're proposing, Vaughn, and I'm sorry, Bill, but how I've seen it done in the past is that the Unified Union School District would have whatever that number is, I saw the breakdown in there, would be overseeing whatever elementary schools and 5 through 12, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
And you have these standalones.
Correct.
Their board operates this one, and this board operates this one.
Yes.
Their supervisory union, you're saying, is going to be the Unified Union Board?
There will be.
He's saying yes, and you're saying no.
Well, if I can answer that precisely, there will be a distinct supervisory union. that supervisory union board membership will be identical to the membership on the modified union board, with the addition of representatives appointed from the elementary schools who are not part of the modified unified union district. Would you agree with that, Vaughn?
Right. I think we started at a different spot.
Okay, so, Bill, that, the union board that you're talking about, in current statute, there would be 3 supervisors. How many board members are on these, any of the 2 little boards, 5 or 3?
5. Each of our elementary school boards has 5 members.
So 3 of those 5 would then have 3 votes on the other, according to SU?
Now, part of our articles, which we have submitted,
Right, I saw
are
the numbers.
there would be proportional voting on the SU equal to the proportional voting that is on the modified union board. So that would be based on population.
Okay, Bill, back to Bill, you had 2 questions before you get interrupted.
Well, it's kind of difficult not to be interrupted on this one. This really gets back to what Stacy and Mark were getting at, which is the language of the motion. As I read 706C, this board would vote to say it is okay to take this back to the local towns and vote it, and let them hash out the merits of the issue. That those are the people who should do that determination. Which gets me to thinking, is our authority as a state board really to make sure that all the requirements of 706B as to what should be in the proposal are there and are in acceptable form? Is that what we're doing?
That's clearly part of what you're doing. I'm not an attorney, so you're getting into...
I'd like to hear some opinions on that from folks.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Me too.
Okay.
Technically,
706C requires the state board to vote positively that this is in the best interest, blah, 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 before, and then you can take it back to the public to decide.
Correct.
The question in my mind is this the proper body to be determining the merits of the issues that were raised, that we just heard from about the quality, the cost, or what have you, or is that really something that the people in the town should decide?
Well, I'm not sure that's a legal question. There's a legal dimension to it. The legal dimension is that your resolution needs to track the language of the statute, or it may not be legally effective. The policy issue is really the deeper one, and that is what criteria and standards should this board apply in making that determination. And I would submit to you that those standards should consider heavily the following: that a no vote means that the process is stopped. Make no mistake about it. Stop dead in its tracks. A yes vote gives the vibrant community debate, which you heard today, a chance to go forward, and allows that to play out in the community.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm interpreting from this particular conversation is, technically, are we about to approve your report? And I believe that this report that's been submitted actually through Vaughn and the secretary for the board meets the criteria in terms of what's expected to be in it from that big old template that was created a while ago. That's, Bill, what you're asking, right?
Yes. The 706B has the criteria, and that's clear. Whether it's a satisfactory answer or not is another matter entirely. And this is what throws me, is the language that's in the statute is we have to determine what's in the best interest of that, which is a more stringent criteria than simply authorizing to go to the voters. That's a much stronger question and a much stronger threshold or hurdle.
I agree completely with Bill. I feel really uncomfortable making a decision as to what is best for all the students of the state. But I could feel much more comfortable turning it over to those that this decision really affects.
Yeah.
It's the 2 in 1.
So is there a motion on the floor,
No,
Stephen?
I'm the chair of this board.
I'm asking you a question.
No, there is not a motion pending. Is there a motion to be made?
I make a motion,
You wish to submit what was,
I have it too. That the State Board of Education find that the proposed formation of the Chittenden East Modified Union School District, you know what, this is where I think people are having a problem. It should say that they're submitting the Unified Union School District report and articles of agreement. That's what we're approving for you to bring forward, right? I mean, I'm asking you. Okay, so.
Yeah, I don't like this.
What the statute says.
I think that, this language is almost verbatim from the statute.
I know, but I guess what I think people are saying is that they're approving the report. They're approving that the report was submitted properly and with all the information. And then it's certainly not up to this board to make a conclusion. It's up to the citizens in those towns, which is what I think we're all advocating, that the people in the towns make that decision. We're approving the report that they've submitted that's been approved by the agency. I mean, that's how I read it.
From a policy point of view, in reviewing that report, it's the responsibility of this board also to look at, is this a wise proposal? And knowing full well that we don't have the final say on it, but.
So I guess I interpret it as what's being presented to us had its due diligence from the way that the makeup of the committee is presented in law and gone through the agency. That's how I interpret it. That's my interpretation. If you want me to read this exact language.
No, so Sean Marie has made the motion to recommend that the State Board find the proposed formation of Chittenden East Modified Union District, et cetera, that's been presented. Is there a second to that? Krista will
Could you just,
second.
before a second, could you just clarify again exactly what the
I'm-
motion is?
what is she
Is the
is-
motion from here?
Exactly what was presented to us from the agency.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Is there discussion on that? Yes, Krista.
I do feel like this is the issue we struggled with a lot last year and talking about imposing it from a state level. But this is something that's coming from the ground up. And I feel very strongly that we have talked about the benefits of bringing together this district, especially this district, the supervisory union. It was so interesting because you are already doing it 5 through 12, not even 7 through 12. As a community, you'd already decided years ago, okay, well, we're going to include 5 and 6 in this because it works. And so you backed it up. So this is just, it looks like the next step from the ground up. And I do think this is what's in the best interest of, if we're looking at this, what's in the best interest of the student, the state, and the school districts involved, that this report gives a good description of why they think it's what's best. And I don't think anything in here would prove to me that I shouldn't allow the voters of those communities to decide that is what's best. We're not saying that this is the only option, but this report gives a lot of great evidence. And I admire the people that spoke up, and especially the woman that wrote the minority report. I mean, that's very important within this process to be a lone voice sometimes. And I respect that, and that's part of this report. And I think giving it to the voters and allowing them to make a decision is the only thing that I think is conscionable to do. I wouldn't want to stop that. And the voters might look at the minority report, they might have more questions and might say no. All towns might say no. And then you would go back to drawing board, people would voice their concerns. But I almost feel like this is where the campaign for this starts. And we don't even know right now who the governor is, the Republican candidate, because we don't know until the primary.
You might be getting out of order here.
Well, no, I'm saying the
we don't wanna
primary
get
is
into
October
politics.
26th. Or sorry, August 26th. So if that's the primary to find out who's running against the governor, I think this is ample time for a community to grapple with these questions, and I hope there are public forums. Yeah, I'm answering that no time.
All right.
But-
Stacy.
Yes.
I think actually Krista covered. I don't need to.
Okay. All right, so the motion is before the board to approve the motion that was presented to us by the agency. It's been moved and seconded.
And I'm going to stress that the part of the motion that it says to vote,
It says, vote to approve the attached report of the Chittenden East Supervisory Union. And that is what I believe we are doing.
Yes. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, we'll go to a roll call vote. Will you call the roll? Perry?
Yes, Karen?
No.
Weinberger?
Yes.
Morgan?
No.
Pollard?
Yes.
Hewlett?
Yes.
And Mathis?
Yes.
So I tie that as 5-1?
The motion passes on a 5-1 vote.
5-2.
5-2, pardon me.
Who's the second vote?
Morgan.
Morgan.
Congratulations, best of luck.
Thank you.
Wish you well.
And thank
The
you,
board will take a
everyone.
10-minute recess. Agenda item, I want to go back very briefly to an earlier discussion about the state's rescissions and the need to reduce the budget. And someone from the agency said something about that the board's budget would be reviewed to see if there were places where it could be cut there and for the purposes of the agency. Jill's laughing because I think it was her idea. One thought is that we, the board, instead of buying everyone from the agency lunch, we start charging them for lunch.
I think a surcharge for the service is necessary too.
You've just gone from peanut butter and jelly to tuna fish.
On to an easy item. Item L, pre-K rulemaking.
Just to confirm, there was nothing in the packet with this,
No,
right?
but it's been presented
There was
since.
a green sheet that came out late.
Yeah, it's,
You should have one right
here it is. There it is.
Okay. Perry's very organized.
Mix that in.
And the single
Here's this, you can have this one.
You were on the roll?
So proceed.
Okay, Karen Edwards, Agency of Education.
Manuel Fonska, Agency of Education as well.
And we're here to ask you to initiate rulemaking for the state board rules that result from the passage of Act 166, the Universal Access to Pre-K bill. And we have that bill charges the agencies of education and human services to develop rules, jointly develop rules that address the provisions of the legislation. We have a small group from the agencies that has been working on a draft. It's a very close to the bones draft. These rules are really time sensitive because they affect next year's school budgets, and those budgets are being developed now. So we've been very aware of that, and we'll have a set of rules that will be publicly available on September 4th. We put ourselves on a very tight timeline.
Now, my memory from the EQS rules that we just went through, that was an 8-month process? So
Yes.
how is that timing going to come together with the need for this? I mean, it has no effect on what I think about what you're proposing today, but I'm just curious.
Well, we recognize that what we put out September 10th will not, September 4th will not have public comment, will not have had public comment yet, but at least it will give people developing those budgets an idea of what the direction is. So that's one of the difficulties. The other one is that there are provisions that were in the former pre-K rules that are not in Act 166, so we're in kind of a gray area now about how those get dealt with, and we're working on some guidance for that as well. I don't know if I answered your question.
So to be clear, we are on an abbreviated timeline for doing this, in part because school districts need to be able to budget in the coming budget cycle. That means we need to be signaling what some of the factors they need to consider are through rulemaking. Is that a way?
Is there a way to speed that rulemaking process up?
They're working really hard and really fast.
Yes, I do.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't
It's not
think so.
humanly possible.
There actually is one thing that you could consider. We generally come to the state board twice, once for discussion and once for initiating the rulemaking. If you could consider when we come back, that might cut a month off, that we could do it in 1 month, one meeting rather than 2.
But you would come back to us once more with the rules, is that right?
We'll be coming in September with the draft of the rules, then we go through the ICAR, public comment, LCAR, but we come back to you at one point, and we're hoping February, March that we're able to do that. And if you would consider condensing that to 1 month rather than 2, that would help a bit.
Why don't we take that up when you come back?
Right.
But I would think would be possible, but it'd be premature to make that decision today.
Right.
Any questions on this?
So we should have a substantive agenda item in September that discusses this.
But they need action today to initiate the rulemaking process with respect to this.
Okay.
Have you made that motion, Bill?
I think it did.
And Sean Marie seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. No need for a roll call. The ayes have it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we wanted to look at, so if we wanted to see what you might be bringing forward in terms of looking at the pre-K language, we could look at the bill that was passed?
It's very close to the bill. It's got very close to the bill. I did make a handout, if you'd like it, that it tells you what the issue is from the bill we have been working on, and what our timeline has been, and what our timeline is going forward.
Even if
that would be helpful.
Just take it. She made a handout for us.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, please feel free to distribute that. You had 16th of September is our next meeting.
I'll double check. I'll tell you. I'm just conferring with Perry.
Did they go which way? Either way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I already have that, so go ahead and keep it.
See if we have enough time.
Usually
Bill
your
already
copy's
has
over
it,
here.
right?
No, not yet, thank you.
Thank you. It's the 16th.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the last agenda item. M, statewide assessment, appropriate use of test scores. And I'll turn this over to Bill, but I want to say in advance, I know we've been going through this for 2 or 3 meetings, and in reading this over, Bill, I was mighty impressed with what we have here. And so with that positive thing, please lead us through this.
Yes, I should take about the same amount of time as we spent on Chittenden East on this one. We've been over this 2 or 3 times. My only recommended change on this one is to change the title and say Statement and Resolution on Assessment and Accountability, and delete the version 8 and the heading stuff.
I like the July 4th, though.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Actually, when I,
Independence Day.
yeah, it was kind of neat doing it on Independence Day. The changes have been those things that you have recommended. There's nothing new here that we haven't seen before. We were in a position to vote last month, but it was not warned for a vote, and so that brings it up to today. This is very highly compatible with the Secretary's letter that just went out that we were discussing earlier. And so with that, I would move the adoption of the statement and resolution.
So moved.
And seconded by Sean Marie. The only thing I would add, I mean, this is an incredible statement, so I think we really need to think, maybe between the agency and the board, of how we get this resolution out and this position that we've taken. I mean, this accompanies what Rebecca and the agency has just done, I believe, and not to steal her limelight, but only to
Go ahead.
Reinforce the message.
Reinforce the message. So I guess I would let's think about how we can get this out, and maybe what the agency could do to get it out as well.
The new website's awesome. Could we add it there?
Absolutely.
Krista.
I mean, I loved your letter, first of all, and I love this draft too. It's been such a work in progress, and it's amazing from the first draft to now. It's even better, so thank you, Bill. I'm just wondering if we could pair those two together. And just as an educator, I would love to get both documents almost. Never mind as an educator, maybe parents too. Is there any way to send it out on the weekly memo and ask principals or superintendents to send it to their list? I think having both of those pairs together, because I was able to see your letter, I listened to you on VPR, which you did a great job, and then went online and looked at it. But I was just thinking, as an educator, I didn't get it from my school, and that would be very nice to start the school year with that message, coming from the secretary and from the state board, that there's such a strong stance for teachers, and I think it gives that teachers come back to school with this little bit of boost, and it puts another little boost in your step, and just think would be a great way just to share that with everybody.
I think we would leave it with the agency, knowing that we can't really ask you to do anything specifically, but we think that there's what I'm hearing from the board, there's a very strong message here from both the secretary and the board, and we would suggest to the agency to do whatever you could to get this information out. And if there's more that we as a board can do, let us know, and we'd be more than happy to do it.
I think we should get the statement out to NASB and also to the chiefs' organizations. And if you can do that, that would be great. Or we could coordinate that in some fashion. We should also get it to the major national education associations as well.
All right, with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. It's unanimous, and Bill, once again, thank you for all your hard work, and it's a great statement, and let's hope it has some effect south of here. Anything else that a board member would like to bring up before today's meeting? Our next meeting is in September 16th, and I think I heard earlier it's in southern Vermont, in Springfield, almost southern Vermont. And where is it in Springfield, do we know?
We don't know that yet.
Okay.
We hope to know by the 15th.
All right.
The 15th of September?
Well, if you're hard up for a site in southern Vermont, I'm sure I could find you someplace in Newfane.
Okay.
I second that.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
And seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Cheers. Yay, Morgan.